There are moments in every soldier's life when the universe reveals itself to be crueler than any enemy could design, when the choices that seemed reasonable hours ago transform into catastrophic errors that cannot be undone, when saving lives today means condemning millions tomorrow. For Anakin Skywalker, that moment arrived at 0347 ship time on what should have been a routine return journey from the Klingon border. The Resolute was operating at standard cruise velocity. The crew relaxed after successfully completing another contract, this time eliminating a Romulan listening post that had been compromising Klingon border security. The operation had been clean, efficient, and profitable. 3 months of dedicated research time at the Klingon Science Institute, enough dilithium crystals to power the fleet for a year, and 0 casualties. But by the standards the 501st had established over 8 months in the Star Trek universe, it was a perfect mission. Then the distress signal arrived. "Sir, we're receiving emergency transmission from Federation Colony Tesron 4, reported Clone Lieutenant Kix from the communications station. Audio and visual, extreme distress. They're under attack by..." He paused, his voice carrying confusion. "They're calling it a Borg cube. Does that designation mean anything to anyone?" Anakin felt a chill run through the Force before anyone could answer. Not dark side corruption or Sith presence, but something else. A vast, cold intelligence that felt fundamentally wrong in a way his Jedi training had never prepared him to process. It was like sensing a black hole where a star should be, an absence so profound it created its own terrible gravity. "Put it through," Anakin ordered, already moving toward the command chair. The view screen filled with chaos. A human woman in Federation civilian clothing stood in what appeared to be an emergency shelter, explosions and screams echoing in the background. Blood ran from a cut above her eye, and her hands shook as she tried to maintain composure. "This is Governor Chen of Tesron 4 Colony. We are under attack by a Borg vessel. Repeat, Borg Cube has entered orbit and is deploying drones to the surface. Our shields are failing. Our weapons are ineffective. Starfleet has been notified but won't arrive in time. If anyone can hear this transmission, if anyone is close enough to respond, please, we have 47,000 civilians here, children, families. We need..." The transmission cut to static, that then resolved into an image that would haunt Anakin's nightmares for the rest of his life. A massive cubic structure hung in orbit over Tesron 4, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and reconfigure continuously. Green energy beams lanced down from the cube toward the planet's surface, cutting through defensive shields like they didn't exist. And throughout the transmission's background, one phrase repeated with mechanical precision: "We are the Borg. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated." "Tactical analysis," Anakin demanded, his mind already calculating response vectors and engagement protocols. Admiral Yularen pulled up sensor data that the Resolute was receiving from the distress signal's embedded telemetry. The cubic vessel measures approximately 3 kilometers per edge. The energy output exceeds anything in our database, reading power signatures equivalent to 3 Venator-class destroyers. Weapons appear to be directed energy beams that can cut through standard deflector shields. "Sir, this is beyond anything we've encountered in this universe." "How far?" Anakin asked. 14 million kilometers, Yularen replied. At maximum sublight, we could reach Tesron 4 in 43 minutes. Through the Force, Anakin felt Ahsoka's presence beside him before she spoke. "Master, we don't know what we're dealing with. This Borg designation. None of our intelligence from the Klingons or Romulans mentioned them. That suggests they are either extremely rare or extremely dangerous, probably both. Which is exactly why 47,000 civilians need help," Anakin replied. "As if whatever that cube is scares the major powers badly enough that they don't talk about it, then those people are already dead unless someone intervenes. We're someone, and we're close enough to make a difference." "Sir," Rex's voice carried the warning tone of a soldier who'd learned to recognize when his general was about to make tactically questionable decisions for morally sound reasons. "Permission to speak freely? We've spent 8 months building the 501st's reputation as professional military contractors who evaluate operations based on risk-benefit analysis. This is pure rescue mission with unknown enemy capabilities. That's not what we do anymore." Anakin met his commander's eyes through the T-visor, seeing in Rex the same conflict he felt in himself. The clone trooper was right. The 501st had evolved from Republic military force to independent contractors, precisely because strategic calculation kept them alive in a universe where they had no institutional support. Rushing into combat against unknown enemies to save strangers violated every operational protocol they'd established. But Anakin Skywalker had never been good at letting people die when he had power to save them. "You're right, Rex," Anakin acknowledged. "This is tactically questionable. It might be the worst decision I've made since arriving in this universe, but I didn't spend 3 years fighting the Separatists, didn't lead the 501st through hell across 100 battlefields, didn't survive being stranded in a universe that doesn't want us, just to become the kind of soldiers who calculate acceptable civilian casualties. All ships, battle stations, plot intercept course for Tesron 4. We're going in." The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as the fleet transitioned from cruise status to combat readiness. Throughout the Resolute and across the task force, 10,000 clone troopers prepared for battle against an enemy they didn't understand, following a general whose compassion had saved countless lives and occasionally nearly gotten them all killed. "General Skywalker," a new voice interrupted. "Commander Michael Burnham, the Federation officer who defected 8 months ago and now served as the 501st's liaison to Federation factions. She'd been in the Auxiliary Command Center, coordinating intelligence networks when the distress call arrived. I need to brief you on the Borg before you engage. Sir, this is not a fight you can win through conventional tactics." "Conference room, 2 minutes," Anakin ordered. "Ahsoka, you have the bridge. Maximum acceleration to Tesron 4, but maintain combat spacing. If that cube does anything threatening, we go to full defensive posture." The conference room briefing lasted exactly 90 seconds, and every second drained the confidence from Anakin's decision like air escaping a breached hull. The Borg Collective is a hive mind spanning trillions of drones across thousands of star systems, Burnham explained, pulling up classified Starfleet data on her PADD. They're cybernetic organisms, biological beings enhanced with technological implants that link them to a shared consciousness. They assimilate species and technology, integrating everything they encounter into their collective. And most terrifying, they adapt. Hit them with a weapon once, it works. Hit them twice, maybe it works. Hit them 3 times, their shields have adjusted, and that weapon is now completely ineffective. She pulled up tactical footage from what appeared to be a Federation engagement. Starfleet vessels firing phasers at a Borg cube, the first shots punching through and causing visible damage, subsequent shots being absorbed by shields that had adapted to the frequency. "How do you beat them?" Anakin asked. "You don't," Burnham replied bluntly. "The Federation has faced the Borg twice. Both times we lost dozens of ships. Both times we only survived because the Borg had objectives beyond just destroying us. General, if you engage that cube, you're not saving those colonists. You're just adding 10,000 more people to the assimilation count." Plo Koon's holographic form materialized in the conference room, transmitted from the Invincible. "Anakin, I must counsel extreme caution. The Force is warning me about this entity. Not dark side presence, but something equally dangerous, a void where individual consciousness should exist. If this collective operates as Commander Burnham describes, it may be antithetical to the Force itself." "Then it's a good thing we're not planning to join their hive mind," Anakin replied. "Commander Burnham, your assessment is noted, but those are Federation tactics based on Federation technology. The 501st has weapons the Borg haven't encountered. Our deflector shields operate on different principles than Federation systems. Man, we have capability." He gestured to himself and the holographic Plo Koon. "That don't involve technology at all. We engage, we save who we can, and we withdraw before the Borg can fully adapt." "Sir, that's not how the Borg work," Burnham protested. "They don't give you time to withdraw. They don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners unless they're assimilating them. You engage that cube, and you're committed to a fight you cannot win. Then we'll lose in a way that saves some of those 47,000 people," Anakin decided. "Because, Commander, I've spent 8 months in this universe learning that everyone here operates through risk-benefit calculations about acceptable losses. The Federation writes off colonies because saving them is strategically expensive. The Klingons abandon worlds that can't defend themselves. The Romulans manipulate everyone else into fighting their battles. I'm tired of it. The 501st stands for something, and what we stand for is that civilians under threat deserve protection regardless of the tactical complications." The decision was made. The die was cast. And as the Resolute dropped out of warp at the edge of the Tezron system, 39 minutes later, Anakin felt the Force screaming warnings that this engagement would change everything. The Borg cube hung in high orbit over Tezron, like a monument to geometric perfection, its 3-kilometer edges forming a shape that somehow felt wrong despite its mathematical precision. Green energy beams continued to lance toward the planet's surface, and even at this distance, Anakin could see the devastation. Colony domes breached, fires spreading across agricultural zones, and thousands of individual signals that his new type-like awareness identified as people dying in terror. "Sir, scanning the cube," Lieutenant Kix reported, reading massive power signatures, thousands of internal compartments, and Force, sir, I'm detecting approximately 130,000 individual life signs aboard that vessel. all reading as cybernetically enhanced humanoids, all moving with perfect coordination. "The drones," Burnham confirmed. "They're already assimilating the colony. Every person they capture gets technological implants and integration into the hive mind. In hours, those 47,000 civilians will become 47,000 more Borg." "Not if we stop them," Anakin said. "All batteries target the cube's surface. Fire." The Resolute's turbo-laser batteries opened up with the distinctive scream of coherent energy, accelerated to near-light speed. Emerald death crossed the void and struck the Borg cube's shields and simply dissipated, absorbed by defensive systems that had never encountered Republic weapons technology, but which adapted in real time through processing algorithms refined across millennia of assimilating civilizations. "Shields holding at 100%, Kix reported, disbelief evident in his voice. "Sir, they adapted before our weapons even hit them. The sensors show the cube analyzing our weapon signatures and reconfiguring shield frequencies during our firing sequence. I've never seen adaptation that fast." "Then we change the frequency," Anakin ordered. "Rotate through every turbo laser setting we have. Don't give them time to adapt." The Resolute and the rest of the 501st Fleet opened fire with weapons cycling through every available configuration. Different energy outputs, different pulse rates, different beam coherence patterns. Some shots penetrated the shields, most didn't. And with each passing second, the percentage that succeeded dropped as the Borg adapted to Republic weapons technology with terrifying efficiency. "Incoming transmission," Kix announced. "It's from the cube." The view screen filled with an image that would define every nightmare that followed. A humanoid figure, once human, now more machine than person, stood in what appeared to be the cube's command center. Technological implants covered half its face, one eye replaced by an optical sensor that glowed with red light. Tubes ran from its neck to systems embedded in its torso, and when it spoke, the voice carried the layered harmonics of thousands, speaking in perfect unison. "We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile." Through the Force, Anakin tried to sense the speaker's emotional state and found nothing. Not dark side corruption, not light side presence, not even the neutral background awareness that all living beings carried, just void, emptiness where a person should be. Consciousness subsumed into something vast and utterly alien. "This is General Anakin Skywalker of the 501st Legion," Anakin replied, pitching his voice to carry authority despite the fear crawling up his spine. "We're here to defend the colony you're attacking. Withdraw your forces from Tesron 4, and we won't have to destroy you." The Borg drone's expression didn't change, couldn't change, with half its face locked in cybernetic rigidity. "Your technological capabilities have been analyzed. You possess weapons operating on principles the Collective has not previously encountered. You will be assimilated. Species designation 11-7-42. You are now part of the Borg." The transmission ended, and the cube turned toward the 501st Fleet with the ponderous inevitability of a celestial object adjusting its orbit, bringing weapons to bear that had destroyed civilizations across the galaxy. "Evasive maneuvers," Anakin commanded. "All ships scatter formation. Don't give them a concentrated target." The Borg cutting beam lanced out, not the green energy lance they'd used on the planet, but something that made space itself scream. Reality tore along the beam's path, and when it intersected the Invincible's position, Plo Koon's destroyer simply ceased to exist in that location, phasing into dimensional space for exactly 1.7 seconds before reality reasserted itself, and the ship tumbled back into normal space with catastrophic systems failures. "Invincible reporting critical damage," reported the communications officer. "Hull breaches on 7 decks. Main reactor offline. Shields at 12%. Master Plo Koon is evacuating non-essential personnel." Anakin felt his apprentice's presence beside him as Ahsoka gripped the tactical console. "Master, we need to withdraw. That beam, I felt it through the Force. It doesn't just damage matter, it disrupts the fundamental bonds holding reality together. If it hits us directly..." "I know," Anakin replied, "but 47,000 people are dying down there. All starfighters launch. Target the cube's surface. Look for weak points for the emitters generating that cutting beam. And someone get me Commander Burnham. I need to know if the Federation has any intelligence on Borg vulnerabilities we can exploit." The battle that followed lasted 17 minutes and taught the 501st a lesson they would carry for the rest of their time in the Star Trek universe. Some enemies cannot be defeated through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. Some enemies simply are vast, patient, and absolutely certain that resistance is futile because they have assimilated 1,000 species who thought the same thing the 501st was thinking right now. By the time Anakin gave the order to retreat, they'd lost 3 starfighters, suffered damage to every ship in the fleet, and saved exactly 0 colonists from Tesron 4. But they'd given the Borg something the Collective had never encountered before: sensor readings on Jedi abilities, Republic weapons technology, and most critically, the dimensional energy signatures that Dr. Cardell's research had been generating for months. The Borg had designated them Species 11742, and the Collective had decided they were worthy of assimilation. The hunt had begun. The Resolute's medical bay had become a triage center for damage that went beyond physical injury. Clone medics moved through rows of beds, treating burns from exploding consoles, decompression trauma from hull breaches, and the psychological shock that came from encountering an enemy that operated according to rules the Republic had never imagined. Anakin stood over the bed where Clone Trooper 5s lay, his armor scorched black from the plasma fire that had erupted when the Borg cutting beam grazed the Resolute's port hangar. The trooper would survive. Clone resilience and Republic medical technology ensured that, but his eyes carried the particular haunted look of someone who'd glimpsed something fundamentally wrong with the universe. "Sir," Five said, his voice rough from smoke inhalation, "what were those things?" "Yeah, I've fought Separatist droids, bounty hunters, even that dimensional creature, but those used to be people. I could see it in their faces, what was left of their faces." "The Borg," Anakin replied quietly, "an enemy that turns people into machines, into parts of a collective consciousness that erases everything that made them individual. Like the Separatists tried to do with their control chips," Fives observed, "making soldiers into programmable units without choice. But worse, because at least droids were built that way. These Borg, they steal what makes people human and replace it with nothing. Anakin had no response that would comfort his trooper, so he simply placed a hand on Fives' shoulder, the gesture of brotherhood that clone culture valued more than words, and moved to the next bed, the next casualty, the next reminder that his decision to engage the Borg cube had cost the 500 first blood without saving a single civilian. The senior command staff meeting 3 hours after the battle carried the weight of commanders processing tactical failure that couldn't be blamed on any individual's incompetence. They'd executed perfectly according to Republic doctrine. They'd adapted rapidly to new threats. They'd fought with coordination that would have defeated any Separatist fleet. And they'd lost anyway, because the Borg operated according to principles that made conventional military doctrine irrelevant. Damage assessment, Admiral Yularen began, his voice carrying the professional detachment of an officer who'd learned to deliver bad news without emotion. The Invincible requires 3 weeks minimum repair time. 7 systems are operating at reduced capacity across the fleet. We lost 11 starfighters and their pilots. Casualty count, 43 dead, 117 wounded. And tactically, we accomplished nothing. Tesron 4 fell to complete Borg assimilation 6 minutes after we withdrew. 47,000 civilians are now 47,000 Borg drones. The silence that followed was absolute. Every officer in the conference room processing that they'd just lost an engagement that cost Republic lives without achieving any objective worth the expenditure. There's worse news, Commander Burnham added, pulling up sensor logs on the holographic display. During the engagement, the Borg cube conducted extensive scans of your fleet. They analyzed your weapons, your shields, your ship configurations, and she highlighted specific data streams. They paid particular attention to the dimensional energy signatures emanating from your research facility. General Skywalker, I think the Borg followed those signatures to find you. Your dimensional research is what brought them here. Dr. Ames Cardell, still carrying the red luminescence in her eyes from her dimensional exposure 8 months prior, stood abruptly, her face pale. That's impossible. We've been running the containment protocols at maximum. The micro-rift experiment was completely shielded. There's no way dimensional energy could have leaked beyond. She stopped, realization crossing her features. Unless the Borg have sensors that operate across dimensional boundaries. Unless they can detect rifts through the barriers between universes themselves. Which would explain their interest, Plo Koon observed, his holographic form flickering slightly from transmission interference caused by his damaged ship. Anakin, the Borg encountered dimensional technology during their scan of Dr. Cardell's research station. If they assimilate that knowledge, they gain access not just to our ships and weapons, but to the theoretical framework for traveling between universes. They could find the Republic. The implications settled over the conference room like a shroud. The 501st had spent 8 months fighting to accumulate resources for dimensional research that would send them home. They'd accepted contracts, formed alliances, and built technology that pushed the boundaries of what Star Trek universe physics allowed. And in doing so, they'd created a beacon that attracted the attention of an entity that wanted to assimilate everything they were and everything they could access. The research station, Anakin said, his voice tight. Where is it now? Asteroid designation Tesra 7, Cardell replied. 2 light-years from our current position. It's a captured Romulan mining facility that we converted into a laboratory. Minimal defenses, civilian research staff, and... Her voice broke slightly. And all of our dimensional rift data. 8 months of research. Our only viable path to creating controlled dimensional travel. If the Borg assimilate that station, they'll have everything they need to start building their own dimensional gateway. Burnham finished. And with their resources, their computational power, their ability to integrate technology from thousands of assimilated species, they could succeed where we've been struggling. They could open rifts to other universes, including yours, General. Ahsoka's voice cut through the mounting dread. Then we destroy it, the research, the station, everything. We can't let the Borg have access to dimensional technology. Master, you've said before that some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve. This is that knowledge. Agreed, Rex stated, his tactical mind overriding any sentimental attachment to their only route home. Sir, if the Borg gain dimensional travel, they become threat to infinite universes instead of just this one. The Republic, the Clone Wars, everything we left behind. None of it matters if we enable the Borg to spread across realities. Do we destroy the research and find another way home? Anakin felt the decision crystallizing through the Force, felt the weight of choosing between the 501st's desperate hope of return and the responsibility of preventing a catastrophe that would dwarf anything the Clone Wars had produced. The path was clear. The choice was obvious, and he hated it with every fiber of his being. No, Anakin said. The conference room erupted in protests, but Anakin raised his hand for silence. We're not destroying 8 months of work and our only viable path home without exhausting every other option first. The Borg haven't reached the research station yet. We have time to implement defense, to evacuate the critical data, to find a solution that doesn't require surrendering our only advantage in this universe. General, with respect, what solution? Yularen challenged. We just engaged a single Borg cube and lost. The Collective has thousands of cubes, millions of drones, resources that dwarf anything the 501st can marshal. We cannot defend that station against a determined Borg assault. All we can do is ensure they don't acquire what we've built. Then we don't defend it alone, Anakin decided. Commander Burnham, contact whoever you trust most in Starfleet Command. Tell them the Borg are targeting dimensional research that could give the Collective access to parallel universes. The Federation has fought the Borg before. They'll understand the stakes. And get me General Cole. The Klingons funded that research. They have vested interest in preventing the Borg from stealing it. Sir, you're proposing alliance with the Federation, Rex observed. After Section 31 tried to drug and interrogate us 8 months ago. After we've spent that time deliberately operating independently specifically to avoid entanglements with powers that see us as resources to exploit. I'm proposing temporary cooperation against mutual threat, Anakin corrected. The Borg don't care about politics or past grievances. They just assimilate. That makes them everyone's problem. And if there's one thing I learned from 3 years of the Clone Wars, it's that desperate times create very strange alliances. The transmission to Federation Starfleet Command took 6 hours to arrange through the circuitous channels, that the 501st had developed for communicating with the fractured power structures in the Alpha Quadrant. So when Admiral Catherine Janeway's face finally appeared on the view screen, transmitted from Starfleet headquarters on Earth, her expression carried the particular strain of someone who'd fought the Borg personally and understood exactly what the 501st was facing. General Skywalker, Janeway began without preamble, her voice carrying authority earned through commanding the USS Voyager through 7 years stranded in the Delta Quadrant. Commander Burnham's report indicates you engaged a Borg cube at Tesron 4 and survived. That puts you in a very exclusive club. Most people who engage the Borg don't get to report the experience. "We didn't win, Admiral," Anakin replied. "We retreated after accomplishing nothing except giving the Borg detailed scans of our technology. And now, Commander Burnham tells me that our dimensional research attracted their attention. That makes this partially our fault, and our responsibility to fix before the collective acquires capabilities that threaten multiple universes." Janeway's expression shifted to something approaching approval. Taking responsibility for unintended consequences. That's refreshing coming from an independent military contractor. General, Starfleet is prepared to offer full cooperation in defending your research station. But I need to know, can that dimensional technology actually work? Is it viable for creating controlled rifts between universes? Through the Force, Anakin sensed the calculation beneath Janeway's question. The Federation wanted to help defend against the Borg. Yes, but they also wanted to assess whether the 501st's dimensional research represented opportunity worth protecting versus threat worth eliminating. "It's theoretical," Anakin replied carefully. "Dr. Cardell's team has successfully created micro-rifts lasting less than 1 second. Scaling that to human traversable portals would require years of additional research and resources we don't have. But the theoretical framework exists, and if the Borg assimilate it, their computational power and resource base could succeed where we're struggling. Then we defend it," Janeway decided. "I'm authorizing deployment of the Third Fleet to your coordinates. 12 starships, including 2 Sovereign-class vessels, with anti-Borg modifications developed after our previous encounters. We arrive in 72 hours. General, until then, you hold that station at any cost. Understood?" "Understood, Admiral," Anakin confirmed. "And thank you. I know the 501st hasn't always had the smoothest relationship with the Federation. This cooperation means we both understand that the Borg represent existential threat that supersedes political disagreements," Janeway interrupted. "After we've stopped them from acquiring dimensional technology, we can return to our complicated relationship. But right now, General, we're allies whether either of us likes it or not." Janeway out. The transmission ended, and Anakin felt the weight of command settling across his shoulders like a familiar cloak. The 501st was about to be trapped in another war, not the clone wars they'd left behind, not the mercenary contracts they'd been accepting, but a genuine fight for survival against an enemy that wanted to erase everything that made them human. "General Cole is transmitting," the communications officer announced. "Klingon priority encryption." The Klingon general's scarred face appeared, and Anakin was struck by how much Cole's expression had changed since their first meeting 8 months ago. The warrior who'd challenged Anakin to single combat, now looked at him with something approaching genuine respect, the kind earned through shared battles and proven capability. "General Skywalker," Cole began, his voice carrying the particular edge of someone delivering bad news. "I have reports from my intelligence network. The Borg cube you engaged at Tesron 4 was not operating alone. Long-range sensors detect 3 additional cubes converging on your dimensional research station's coordinates. They will arrive in approximately 60 hours. The Empire is debating whether defending your research serves Klingon interests, or whether we should simply observe and see if the Borg eliminate a potential rival. Tell the High Council that if the Borg acquire dimensional technology, the next universe they invade might be one containing resources the Empire wants," Anakin replied. "And tell them that General Skywalker personally requests Klingon assistance in defending research that could benefit both our peoples. We've fought well together before, Cole. I'm asking you to fight with us again." Cole was silent for a long moment, his expression showing the internal conflict between warrior honor that valued allies who'd proven themselves and political calculation that suggested letting the Borg and the 501st weaken each other served Klingon interests. "I will bring 6 battlecruisers," Cole decided finally. "House Dagor honors its debts to warriors who have demonstrated strength worthy of respect. We arrive in 65 hours. General Skywalker, do not die before I arrive. It would be poor repayment of the honor you've shown my house." The transmission ended, and Ahsoka moved to stand beside Anakin, her presence in the Force as familiar as his own heartbeat. "Master, we're about to fight the Borg with the Federation and the Klingons as allies. 6 months ago, we were dodging Section 31 assassination attempts and negotiating non-aggression pacts with Cole. Now we're coordinating defensive operations like we're all part of the same fleet." "Crisis creates strange alliances," Anakin replied. "The real question is whether those alliances survive once the crisis is over. But snips, that's a problem for tomorrow. Today we need to figure out how to defend a research station against 3 Borg cubes when 1 cube nearly destroyed us." The planning session that followed consumed the next 18 hours as Republic tacticians, Federation strategists, and eventually Klingon battle coordinators worked to devise defensive strategies that might give them a chance of holding the station long enough for reinforcements to make a difference. But throughout the planning, one fact remained inescapable. The Borg had designated the 501st as Species 11-7-42. They had analyzed Republic technology, scanned Jedi abilities, and detected dimensional signatures that suggested capabilities worth assimilating. And the Borg Collective was patient, relentless, and absolutely certain that resistance was futile. They would come for the dimensional research. They would adapt to every defense the 501st deployed, and they would assimilate everything unless the Republic refugees could find a way to fight an enemy that learned from every attack, adjusted to every strategy, and never, ever stopped. The countdown had begun. 58 hours until the Borg arrived. 58 hours to prepare for a battle that would determine whether the 501st remained independent warriors or became drones in a collective that would use their knowledge to spread across infinite realities. And somewhere in the depths of space, traveling through transwarp conduits that bent space-time according to principles the Republic couldn't match. 3 Borg cubes approached their target with the inexorable certainty of machines that had assimilated 1,000 civilizations and expected this one to fall like all the others. Species 11-7-42 would be assimilated. Their biological and technological distinctiveness would be added to the collective. Resistance was futile. The Borg were certain of this. The 501st Legion was about to prove them wrong, or die trying. The message from Starfleet Command arrived 41 hours before the projected Borg arrival, transmitted on encrypted channels that suggested the content was too sensitive for normal military communications. Admiral Janeway's face on the viewscreen carried an expression Anakin had learned to recognize over 8 months in this universe. The look of someone about to ask for something they knew the other party wouldn't want to give. General Skywalker, we need to discuss the dimensional research, Janeway began, her tone carrying the weight of institutional authority rather than personal preference. Starfleet intelligence has conducted threat assessment of what occurs if the Borg successfully assimilate your technology. The conclusion is unacceptable. We're facing potential multiversal catastrophe if the collective gains dimensional travel capability. I'm aware of the stakes, Admiral, Anakin replied, which is why we're preparing to defend the station with everything we have. And if the defense fails, Janeway challenged. General, I've fought the Borg. I've watched them adapt to our best weapons, assimilate our best people, and turn our own technology against us. The Third Fleet is en route, yes, but 12 starships against 3 Borg cubes is optimistic at best, suicidal at worst. We need a contingency plan for if the Borg breach our defenses. Through the Force, Anakin felt the direction this conversation was heading and preemptively hated it. What kind of contingency plan? Destruction of the research station and all associated data, Janeway stated bluntly. Complete elimination of the dimensional technology before the Borg can access it. Starfleet Command is prepared to authorize a photon torpedo strike that will reduce the station to subatomic particles. No data recovery, no salvage, no possibility of Borg assimilation. It's the only way to guarantee the technology doesn't fall into their hands. The conference room, where Anakin had assembled his senior staff for this transmission, went absolutely silent. Dr. Cardell's face drained of color. Admiral Yularen's expression hardened into the mask of professional detachment that meant he was processing devastating information, and Ahsoka's presence in the Force flared with barely controlled anger. You're asking us to destroy 8 months of research, Anakin said, his voice dangerously quiet. The only viable path we've found toward getting home. You're asking 10,000 people stranded in a universe that isn't theirs to surrender their only hope of return, because the Federation is afraid of what the Borg might do with our technology. I'm asking you to prevent multiversal catastrophe, Janeway corrected. General, I understand what this research means to you. I commanded a crew that spent 7 years trying to get home from the Delta Quadrant. I know what it's like to make impossible choices about whether personal objectives justify larger risks. But this isn't just about the 501st or the Federation. This is about every universe that exists. If the Borg gain dimensional travel, they don't just threaten the Alpha Quadrant. They threaten infinite realities, including your Republic. Then we make sure the defense doesn't fail, Anakin replied. Admiral, with respect, the Federation doesn't get to make unilateral decisions about Republic technology. That research station was built with Klingon resources, Romulan expertise, and Republic theoretical frameworks. If it's destroyed, that's a decision all stakeholders make together, not something Starfleet Command orders and expects us to accept. Janeway's expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy. I'm not ordering, General, I'm requesting, but I'm also informing you that Starfleet will take necessary action if the situation becomes critical. We've authorized Captain Lorca, who's commanding the lead Sovereign-class vessel in the Third Fleet, to execute destruction protocols if Borg assimilation becomes imminent. That authorization supersedes any agreements we have with the 501st. Lorca, Anakin repeated, remembering the ambitious Starfleet captain who'd been complicit in Section 31's attempt to interrogate Republic command staff 8 months ago. You're giving the destruction order to someone who's already demonstrated questionable judgment about when Federation interests justify betraying allies. Captain Lorca is a decorated officer who understands Borg threat better than most, Janeway replied, her tone suggesting this wasn't negotiable. General, I'm not trying to antagonize you. I'm trying to ensure that if we lose this battle, we don't lose everything else along with it. Work with us. Help us defend the station, but understand that the Federation has responsibilities to billions of citizens across hundreds of worlds. We cannot risk multiversal Borg invasion to protect one group's chance of going home, even if that group has become valuable allies. The transmission ended before Anakin could respond, leaving the conference room in tense silence. They're going to destroy it, Dr. Cardell said, her voice hollow. Everything we've built, all the progress we've made toward controlled dimensional rifts. The Federation is going to blow it up the moment they think the Borg might win, and we won't have any say in the decision. Unless we win, Ahsoka stated firmly. Master, the Admiral is right about one thing. We can't let the Borg have that technology, but she's wrong about destruction being the only option. We defend the station. We hold the line. Then we prove that the 501st can do what the Federation thinks is impossible. Rex's voice carried the pragmatic skepticism of a soldier who'd learned to recognize when optimism was masking impossible odds. Commander, with respect, we barely survived one Borg cube. Now we're facing 3 cubes and our allies won't arrive until after the Borg do. Even with the Third Fleet's support, this is suicide mission dressed up as defensive operation. Then we change the parameters, Anakin decided, his mind already working through tactical innovations that Republic doctrine and Force intuition suggested. The Borg adapt to weapons, yes, but they adapt based on what they've encountered before. Admiral Yularen, how much of our weapons technology did the Borg actually scan during the Tesron 4 engagement? Yularen pulled up sensor logs, to his analytical mind immediately understanding where Anakin was heading. They scanned our standard turbo laser configurations, our shield frequencies, our ship maneuvering patterns. But, sir, we deployed less than 40% of our total weapons capability during that engagement. We have experimental systems, modified Klingon weapons we've integrated, and several prototype technologies we haven't field tested. Then we don't give them time to adapt, Anakin continued. We hit them with everything at once. weapons they've never seen, tactics they haven't encountered, and force abilities they can't possibly have prepared for. The Borg think resistance is futile because species fight them using predictable patterns. We're not predictable. We're Republic military operating with technology from 3 different civilizations and Jedi capabilities that don't follow any rules this universe recognizes. That's not a strategy, Plo Koon observed, his holographic form materializing as the damaged Invincible came back online. That's hope disguised as tactics. Anakin, even if we surprise them initially, the Borg will adapt. They always adapt. And once they've integrated our innovations into their collective knowledge, we'll be back to conventional warfare against an enemy with overwhelming numerical superiority. Then we make sure the initial surprise is decisive enough that they don't get the chance to adapt. Anakin replied, Master Plo, I know this sounds desperate. It is desperate, but desperation has won battles before when conventional wisdom said defeat was inevitable. The question is whether we're willing to risk everything on one coordinated strike versus accepting that we should destroy the station preemptively. The debate that followed consumed 3 hours and revealed fundamental divisions within the 501st's leadership about whether preserving hope of return justified the risks they were accepting. Some argued for immediate destruction, eliminate the threat, accept they were staying in this universe permanently, and move forward without the Borg hunting them. Others insisted that surrendering their only path home without exhausting every defensive option was premature defeatism. Anakin listened to all perspectives, feeling through the Force the genuine conviction on both sides. These were his people, soldiers, scientists, and support staff, who'd followed him across universes and trusted his leadership, even when his decisions led them into impossible situations. They deserved a choice about whether preserving dimensional research was worth the costs they might pay. We vote, Anakin decided. Every person in the 501st gets a say, not just command staff, not just officers, everyone. Clone troopers, naval personnel, civilian researchers, everyone who came through the dimensional rift 8 months ago. We're asking them to fight and possibly die defending that research station. They deserve to decide if it's worth defending. The vote was conducted over 12 hours using secure Republic voting protocols that the Kaminoans had installed for the rare occasions when clone trooper input was solicited on operational matters. Every member of the 500 first registered their choice anonymously, and the results were compiled by neutral systems that prevented command influence. When the final tally appeared, Anakin felt pride and terror in equal measure. Defend the station, 7,234 votes, 73.4%. Destroy the station, 2,398 votes, 24.3%. Abstain, 215 votes, 2.3%. The 501st had chosen, not through command decree or strategic calculation, but through democratic consensus that preserving hope of return was worth fighting an enemy that had destroyed civilizations across the galaxy. Then we defend it, Anakin announced to the assembled fleet. Every ship, every soldier, every capability we possess. The Borg think resistance is futile. We're about to teach them that futility is a matter of perspective, and that the 501st Legion doesn't accept defeat just because the enemy says it's inevitable. The preparations that followed were a masterclass in improvised military engineering conducted under impossible time constraints. Republic technicians integrated Klingon disruptor technology into turbo-laser batteries, creating hybrid weapons that fired coherent light surrounded by disruptor fields. Two different damage types delivered simultaneously, forcing the Borg to adapt to both or be destroyed by whichever they couldn't counter. Federation engineers contributed shield modifications that rotated frequencies at random intervals rather than predictable patterns, making adaptation require continuous recalibration instead of one-time adjustment. And Romulan specialists, contacted through backchannels that Anakin didn't ask Commander Satok about, provided classified data on plasma torpedo modifications that created cascading shield failures when properly deployed. The research station itself became a fortress. Clone engineers installed additional shield generators, scavenged from damaged ships. Weapons platforms were positioned at strategic points around the asteroid, and Dr. Cardell's team implemented emergency protocols that would allow them to fragment the dimensional research across multiple encrypted data cores. If the Borg breached the station, they'd have to assimilate every core individually rather than capturing everything at once. 36 hours before Borg arrival, General Cole's battle group dropped out of warp at the defensive perimeter. 6 Klingon battle cruisers took up positions that created overlapping fields of fire with the Republic vessels, and Cole transmitted his assessment with characteristic bluntness. "General Skywalker, my tactical officer calculates we have 17% chance of success defending this station against 3 Borg cubes. Those are odds that would make most commanders retreat. But Klingons do not measure victory through probability calculations. We measure it through glory earned in impossible battles. Today, we either defend this station or we die gloriously trying. Either outcome is acceptable." 24 hours before arrival, Admiral Janeway's Third Fleet emerged from warp in attack formation. 12 Federation starships, including 2 massive Sovereign-class vessels bristling with anti-Borg modifications, joined the defensive perimeter. Captain Lorca transmitted coordinates for optimal defensive positioning, his tactical acumen evident despite Anakin's personal distrust of the man. "General, we're as ready as we're going to be," Lorca stated, his expression carrying the predatory focus of someone who'd fought the Borg before and survived through ruthless tactical thinking. "But understand, if the Borg breach our lines and reach the station, I have orders to destroy it. Starfleet won't risk multiversal catastrophe because the 501st wants to preserve their research. Clear?" "Crystal clear, Captain," Anakin replied. "Just make sure you're shooting at the Borg when you decide to start destroying things. We've had enough of Starfleet officers making unilateral decisions that endanger the 501st. 12 hours before arrival, something unexpected happened. Commander Satok transmitted a message from the Romulan Star Empire offering to contribute 3 warbirds to the defensive operation. The price was steep: complete access to any dimensional technology that survived Borg assault, but the additional firepower was desperately needed. The Tal Shiar does not offer assistance without calculating advantage, Satok admitted during the brief negotiation. But our calculations suggest that Borg with dimensional technology threatens the Star Empire more than 501st, with dimensional technology. Therefore, temporary alliance serves Romulan interests. We arrive in 8 hours. Try not to die before we get there. 4 powers, 32 warships, approximately 15,000 personnel from 4 different civilizations, all converging to defend a research station that represented hope for some, threat for others, and the most dangerous piece of technology to appear in the Alpha Quadrant in a century, and approaching through transwarp conduits, traveling at speeds that bent space-time into configurations that shouldn't be possible. 3 Borg cubes closed on their target with mathematical precision. Anakin stood on the Resolute's observation deck in the final hours before battle, feeling through the Force the anxiety, determination, and fear of 10,000 people who'd chosen to defend their hope rather than destroy it preemptively. Ahsoka joined him, her presence as steady as the artificial gravity keeping them anchored to the deck. "Master, are we doing the right thing?" Ahsoka asked quietly. "Risking all these lives, building alliances with powers that might betray us the moment the crisis is over, fighting an enemy we barely understand, all to defend research that might never actually work?" "I don't know," Anakin admitted. "The Jedi Council would probably say we should destroy the station and accept that we're staying here, that preserving one group's hope of return doesn't justify multiversal risk." And they might be right. But Snips, we've spent 8 months in this universe, learning that sometimes the right choice and the smart choice aren't the same thing. This might be the stupidest decision I've ever made, but it's the right one. Because the moment we accept that hope is too expensive to defend, we stop being the 501st and become just another military force calculating acceptable losses. The chrono ticked down. Hours became minutes. Minutes became seconds. And exactly on schedule, because the Borg Collective operated with precision that organic beings could rarely match. 3 massive cubic structures dropped out of transwarp 700,000 kilometers from the research station. Each cube measured 3 kilometers per edge. Each contained over 100,000 drones. Each had assimilated the knowledge of dozens of civilizations. And all 3 had designated species 11-7-42 for assimilation. "All ships, battle stations," Anakin commanded, his voice carrying across the combined fleet through communication channels that connected Republic, Federation, Klingon, and Romulan vessels in unprecedented cooperation. "This is General Anakin Skywalker to all Allied forces. The Borg think resistance is futile. They think we'll adapt to their adaptation until eventually we accept that defeat is inevitable and surrender. They're wrong. Because today, we're not just defending a research station. We're defending the principle that some things are worth fighting for, even when victory seems impossible. The Borg want to assimilate us. Let's show them what happens when they try to assimilate warriors who refuse to accept that resistance is futile." The Borg response came with mechanical precision. "We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile." And the Battle of Tezra 7 began. The Borg didn't charge. They didn't maneuver for tactical advantage. They simply advanced with the inexorable patience of a force that had conquered 1,000 civilizations and expected this one to fall like all the others. 3 perfect cubes moving in perfect synchronization, their surfaces already adapting to the sensor scans that every Allied ship was conducting, their shields modulating through frequencies designed to counter weapons they'd encountered across centuries of assimilation. "Borg cubes maintaining approach vector," reported Lieutenant Kix from the Resolute's tactical station. "Speed holding steady at 0.75 sublight. They're not rushing. They're not even prioritizing targets. Sir, they're treating this like a harvesting operation, not a battle." "Then we remind them what a battle looks like," Anakin replied. He activated the fleet-wide channel that connected Republic, Federation, Klingon, and Romulan vessels. "All ships, weapons-free, engage at maximum range. Don't give them time to close before we've tested every weapon system we have." The combined fleet opened fire with a coordinated barrage that would have reduced any conventional enemy to atomic vapor. Republic turbo lasers screamed across the void in emerald lances. Federation photon torpedoes created brilliant orange detonations against Borg shields. Klingon disruptors carved violet trenches through space, and Romulan plasma torpedoes, the Star Empire's most devastating weapon, struck with green fire that burned at temperatures exceeding stellar cores. For exactly 4.3 seconds, it looked like victory might be possible. The Borg shields collapsed under the coordinated assault. Hull plating shattered. Internal systems exploded in cascading failures. One cube's surface erupted in flames that shouldn't exist in vacuum, but which fed on exotic matter that Borg technology had integrated from assimilated species. Then the adaptation began. "Borg shields reconfiguring," Kix reported, his voice tight with recognition of what was happening. "They're rotating through frequencies faster than our sensors can track. Sir, weapons effectiveness dropping to 40%, 30, 20. They're adapting to everything we're throwing at them simultaneously." Anakin watched through the viewport as the second volley, identical to the first, struck Borg shields that had adjusted to counter every weapon type in the Allied arsenal. The cubes continued their advance, unslowed by attacks that would have crippled capital ships, their surfaces already regenerating the damage through matter replication that drew resources from assimilated materials carried within their vast interiors. "The hybrid weapons," Anakin ordered, "fire." The experimental turbo lasers, modified to fire coherent light wrapped in Klingon disruptor fields, lanced out from the Resolute and struck the lead cube. The Borg shields adapted to the turbo laser component, then the disruptor component, then for exactly 1.2 seconds, failed to compensate for both damage types arriving simultaneously through the same beam. The shot punched through and carved a molten trench 15 meters deep across the cube's surface. "Direct hit," Kix reported. "Borg shields are compensating, but they need additional processing time for hybrid weapons. We've got maybe 6 more shots before they adapt completely." "Then make them count," Anakin replied. "All Republic vessels target the same cube. Concentrate fire on the breach we just created. Commander Burnham, have the Federation ships switch to rotating frequency attacks. Don't give them predictable patterns to adapt to." The Allied fleet adjusted tactics, adapting to the Borg's adaptation in real time through coordination that required perfect trust between forces that had been enemies or uneasy rivals weeks ago. Federation ships cycled through weapon frequencies at random intervals. Klingon vessels concentrate on overwhelming single shield sections through raw firepower. Romulan warbirds used their cloaking devices to strike from unexpected angles, forcing the Borg to defend against threats they couldn't continuously track. And the Republic vessels, guided by Jedi precognition that let Anakin and the other Force users sense optimal firing solutions before conventional sensors could calculate them, struck with precision that exceeded anything technological targeting could achieve. For 8 minutes, the battle seemed almost balanced. The Borg advanced, yes, but slowly. They took damage, regenerated, adapted, and took damage again through variations they hadn't yet countered. The Allied fleet fell into rhythm: Republic precision, Federation coordination, Klingon aggression, and Romulan cunning, creating a whole that exceeded the sum of its parts. Then the Borg changed tactics. "Borg cubes are launching spheres," Kix reported, his voice carrying new urgency. "Count is 18 spheres total, each approximately 600 meters diameter. They're dispersing to flank our formation." The spheres, smaller Borg vessels that served as tactical support for cubes, spread through space with the coordinated precision that only hive mind could achieve. They weren't attacking the Allied fleet directly. They were creating geometric patterns that surrounded the defensive perimeter, establishing positions that would allow them to strike from multiple vectors simultaneously. "They're hurting us," Admiral Yularen observed from his command position aboard the Invincible, pushing our formation into tighter defensive posture while they establish superior positioning. "General Skywalker, if we maintain current formation, we'll be caught in crossfire from 21 Borg vessels attacking from optimal angles." Through the Force, Anakin felt the tactical trap closing like mechanical jaws. The Borg weren't fighting like warriors seeking glory or strategists pursuing advantage. They were operating like precision instruments, executing calculations that had been refined across millions of engagements against thousands of species. "Break formation," Anakin decided. "All ships scatter pattern Delta 7. Don't give them concentrated targets. Klingon vessels, engage the spheres on our port side. Federation ships, take starboard. Romulan warbirds, use your cloaking advantage to strike the spheres from behind. Republic fleet maintains pressure on the lead cube. We're closest to disabling it." The Allied fleet scattered like a disturbed hive, ships breaking in different directions according to pre-planned dispersal patterns that turned concentrated formation into fluid combat groups. The Borg adjusted immediately, cubes and spheres recalculating optimal positions based on new Allied deployment. But for exactly 17 seconds, the tactical situation favored organic unpredictability over mechanical precision. "Master, the lead cube's shields are fluctuating," Ahsoka reported from her position, coordinating starfighter operations. "The damage we inflicted is creating cascade failures across their defensive grid. If we can exploit that weakness before they compensate." "All fighters, launch," Anakin commanded. "Target the shield fluctuations. Get inside their defensive perimeter and hit them with torpedoes before they can regenerate." V-19 Torrent starfighters screamed from Republic hangar bays, joined by Federation fighters, Klingon birds of prey operating in attack mode, and even a handful of Romulan scout vessels. The swarm approached the damaged cube with the kind of coordinated chaos that organic pilots could achieve, and that Borg drones, for all their network deficiency, struggled to counter because it required predicting individual decisions multiplied across hundreds of vessels. The fighters penetrated the cube's defensive perimeter through the shield gaps, and for one glorious moment, the interior of a Borg vessel was exposed to direct fire from torpedoes and missiles that had been specifically designed to exploit the vulnerability. The cube's interior erupted in cascading explosions. Systems failed. Drones were vented into space. Entire sections depressurized as the geometric perfection of the cube's structure collapsed under damage that exceeded its regeneration capacity. Lead cube's power output dropping, Kix reported. 30%. 40, sir. I think we're actually killing it. Then the other two cubes opened fire, not with the cutting beams they'd used at Tesron 4, but with tractor beams, invisible force fields that reached out and seized Allied vessels like a predator's claws closing on prey. The USS Achilles, a Federation Sovereign-class vessel, found itself locked in a tractor beam grip so powerful that its engines screamed trying to break free. Impulse drives pushed past safety limits. Structural supports groaned under stress, and the Borg cube simply pulled, inexorable as gravity, drawing the starship toward its surface where assimilation would begin. "They're trying to capture us intact," Captain Lorca transmitted from the Achilles, his voice carrying controlled fury. "General, if they board this vessel, they'll assimilate our anti-Borg modifications. Everything we've learned about fighting them gets integrated into the collective. I'm not allowing that. Initiating self-destruct sequence." "Negative," Anakin commanded. "Captain, we can break that tractor beam. Ahsoka, redirect starfighters to target the tractor beam emitters. All ships with available weapons support the Achilles." But even as he gave the orders, Anakin felt through the Force that they were fighting a losing battle of attrition. The Borg had infinite patience. They could lose vessels, lose drones, lose entire cubes, and they'd simply bring more. The collective had resources that spanned sectors. The Allied fleet had 32 ships, finite ammunition, and crews that were already showing the strain of sustained combat against an enemy that adapted to everything they tried. "Sir, we're receiving transmission from the damaged cube," Kix reported. It's addressing you specifically, General." A Borg drone appeared on the view screen, but this one was different from the others Anakin had seen. Where most drones were partially mechanical humanoids, this one had been completely integrated. Cybernetic implants covering 90% of its body, optical sensors replacing both eyes, and technological enhancements that made it barely recognizable as once human. When it spoke, the voice carried the layered harmonics of the collective, but with individual inflection that suggested this drone retained more autonomy than typical Borg units. "I am Locutus of Borg," the drone stated. "I speak for the collective. You are Jedi General Anakin Skywalker of Species 11742. You possess abilities the collective requires for achieving perfection. Your force manipulation, your dimensional technology, your adaptive tactics. You will cease resistance and prepare for assimilation. Compliance will ensure optimal preservation of your biological distinctiveness." Through the Force, Anakin felt something that made his blood run cold. This drone, this Locutus, had been specifically modified to interface with the 501st. It was speaking Basic with perfect fluency. It understood Republic military terminology, and most disturbing, it was addressing Anakin by name and rank, which meant the Borg had assimilated information about Republic command structure from somewhere. "Where did you learn about Jedi?" Anakin demanded. "How do you know who I am?" "We assimilated the crew of the research vessel Intervention," Locutus replied. "Dr. Ames Cardell and 11 others were integrated into the collective during preliminary reconnaissance operations. Their knowledge of your capabilities, your dimensional research, and your command structure has been distributed throughout the hive mind. We know what you are, General Skywalker. We know what you possess. And we know that assimilating you will allow the collective to achieve dimensional transcendence. You cannot prevent this outcome. Resistance is futile." The view screen cut back to external view, and Anakin felt his heart stop. 3 LAAT gunships were approaching the Resolute, but their transponders identified them as Republic vessels that should have been conducting routine patrols near the research station. As they closed, the running lights revealed the terrible truth. Borg technology had been grafted onto the Republic craft, and piloting them were clone troopers whose armor had been integrated with cybernetic implants, their biological distinctiveness being added to the collective even as their military training made them devastatingly effective Borg drones. "Sir, those are Jester Squadron," Rex identified, his voice carrying horror. "They were assigned to station defense. The Borg must have infiltrated and assimilated them while we were focused on the cubes. All defensive batteries target those gunships," Anakin commanded. "Do not let them board the Resolute." But even as he gave the order, the assimilated Elat guns opened fire with weapons that combined Republic blaster technology and Borg energy signatures, hybrid systems that the Borg had created by integrating what they'd assimilated from Jester Squadron's equipment and knowledge. The shots bypassed Republic shields entirely, punching through defensive screens that had been designed to stop energy weapons from this universe, but which couldn't compensate for weapons that operated according to Republic principles modified by Borg adaptation. The first gunship penetrated the Resolute's hangar bay, the second attached to the hull near engineering. The third headed directly for the bridge, its cutting beam already slicing through the reinforced uranium plating that separated command deck from vacuum. "Repel boarders," Rex commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "By all clone troopers to defensive stations. The Borg are inside the ship." Anakin ignited his lightsaber as the bridge's blast doors buckled under assault from the assimilated gunship. Through the Force, he felt the approaching presences, clone troopers he'd commanded, soldiers he'd fought beside, brothers who'd shared barracks and battle scars, and the grim camaraderie that came from surviving warfare. Now they were coming to assimilate him. And the worst part, the part that made this nightmare complete, was that somewhere beneath the Borg implants and networked consciousness, those clone troopers were still aware, still trapped inside bodies that no longer belonged to them, still screaming silently as the collective used them to attack their own brothers. The blast doors exploded inward. Assimilated clone troopers poured onto the bridge, their armor integrated with Borg technology, their DC-15 rifles modified with cutting beams, their faces partially obscured by cybernetic implants that glowed with the sickly green light of the collective, and leading them, wearing the distinctive armor of an ARC trooper, with one arm completely replaced by Borg mechanical systems, was clone Captain Jester himself. General Skywalker, Jester said, his voice carrying both clone inflection and Borg harmonics. We are Borg. You will be assimilated. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. We were your soldiers. Now we are the collectives, and soon you will be the collectives as well. Anakin raised his lightsaber, feeling through the Force the terrible certainty that the next few minutes would determine not just whether the 500 first survived this battle, but whether they would remain human or become the very thing they'd been fighting. The Borg had penetrated their defenses, and the assimilation had begun. Anakin's lightsaber cut through the first assimilated clone trooper with the terrible efficiency of plasma burning at 20,000 degrees. The Borg implant sparked and failed, the network connection severing as the drone's biological function ceased. But there was no satisfaction in the kill, only the soul-crushing recognition that he'd just executed one of his own soldiers, a brother who'd fought beside the 500 first for months, who'd survived the Clone Wars and dimensional travel, and 8 months in a hostile universe, only to be turned into a weapon against his own people. "Fall back to secondary positions," Rex commanded, his voice carrying the practiced calm of a soldier who'd learned to function through horror. "Don't let them corner you. Use the corridors. Force them into choke points where their numbers don't matter." The Resolute's bridge became a battlefield. Clone troopers fired on their assimilated brothers with the precision their Kaminoan creators had bred into them. Each shot placed with deadly accuracy that would have been admirable if the targets weren't people they'd shared meals with hours ago. Borg-enhanced clones returned fire with hybrid weapons that combined Republic blaster technology and Borg cutting beams, creating attacks that phased through standard cover and required constant repositioning to avoid. Ahsoka fought beside Anakin, her twin lightsabers creating a defensive sphere that deflected incoming fire, while her Jedi agility let her move through the chaos with preternatural grace. But even her combat prowess couldn't prevent the terrible mathematics of the engagement. There were 12 assimilated clones on the bridge, and every second they remained connected to the Borg Collective, transmitted tactical data about Republic defensive positions, weapons configurations, and Force abilities to the hive mind. "Master, we can't just kill them," Ahsoka shouted over the sound of blaster fire. "They're still our people. There has to be a way to sever the Borg connection without killing them." "There isn't," came a new voice. Dr. Cardell, running onto the bridge from the auxiliary science station, where she'd been coordinating defensive operations. Her eyes still carried that red luminescence from dimensional exposure, and now they blazed with fierce determination. The Borg assimilation process replaces major organs with mechanical systems. Severing the connection means their bodies lose life support, but I can disrupt their network link temporarily, give you a window where they're disconnected from the collective but still alive. She activated a device that looked like a modified tricorder with Republic technology grafted onto Federation components. The screen showed Borg network frequencies mapped against dimensional energy signatures. "This will hurt," Cardell warned, "them and us, but it's the only way to save them." The device emitted a pulse of dimensional energy, not enough to create a rift, but sufficient to disrupt the subspace frequencies the Borg used for their hive mind connection. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every assimilated clone on the bridge screamed. Not with Borg mechanical precision, but with human agony as their consciousness suddenly found itself trapped in bodies that were partially machine, partially organic, and completely horrifying. The network connection that had been suppressing their individual awareness vanished, leaving them fully conscious of what they'd become and what they'd been forced to do. Clone Captain Jester collapsed to his knees, his remaining organic hand clutching at the implants covering half his face. "General," he gasped, his voice purely human now, without the Borg harmonics. "Sir, we're still connected. I can feel the collective trying to re-establish control. You need to kill us before they regain." "No," Anakin stated flatly. "We're getting you to medical. We're removing those implants. We're saving every clone we can, because that's what the 501st does. Rex, get security teams up here. Restrain these troopers and transport them directly to the medical bay. Dr. Cardell, can you maintain that disruption field?" "For maybe 10 minutes before the Borg adapt to the frequency," Cardell replied. "And General, this only works because these clones were recently assimilated. The longer someone's been integrated into the collective, the more their biological systems depend on the implants to survive. These troopers are savable, but anyone who's been Borg for weeks or months, removing the technology would kill them. Then we work fast," Anakin decided, "and we make sure the Borg don't get the chance to assimilate anyone else. Ahsoka, you have the bridge. I'm going to engineering. If the Borg are inside our ship, that's where they'll head. Rex, coordinate with the other ships. Find out if anyone else has been boarded and implement the same disruption protocol." As Anakin ran through the Resolute's corridors toward engineering, the scope of the Borg infiltration became horrifyingly clear. They hadn't just assimilated Jester Squadron. They'd been conducting covert operations for days, infiltrating the research station and the 501st Fleet through methods so subtle that Republic sensors hadn't detected the incursions until assimilated personnel activated and revealed themselves. He found the engineering deck under siege. 20 assimilated personnel, a mix of clone engineers, Republic technicians, and civilian researchers, were attempting to access the ship's primary systems. But they were being held back by a defensive line that included some of the most unlikely allies Anakin had ever seen fighting together. Clone Commander Cody directing fire with tactical precision, Klingon Exchange Officer Lieutenant Kavek fighting with his Batleth in close combat that turned Borg drones into sparking wreckage, and even Commander Burnham using a phaser she'd kept from her Starfleet days to target specific implants with surgical precision. "General," Cody called out, "the Borg are trying to access our dimensional research data through the ship's computers. If they succeed, they'll transmit everything to the collective. We're holding them here, but we need reinforcements, or we need them dead, preferably both." Anakin ignited his lightsaber and charged into the melee, the Force guiding his strikes with precision that turned combat into deadly ballet. But even as he fought, his mind was racing through larger tactical implications. The Borg hadn't just boarded the Resolute. They'd likely infiltrated multiple Allied vessels simultaneously, a coordinated assault designed to capture technology and personnel, while the main fleet was engaged with the cubes and spheres. This wasn't random assimilation. This was strategic acquisition of specific assets the collective had identified as most valuable. "Sir, incoming transmission from the research station," shouted a voice through the ship's communication system. "They're under direct assault. Borg are teleporting drones directly through the shields." The revelation hit Anakin like physical impact. While they'd been focused on defending against the cubes in space, the Borg had been executing a multi-pronged strategy: engage the fleet, board key vessels, and simultaneously assault the actual objective, the dimensional research station itself. "All ships, this is General Skywalker," Anakin transmitted across the Allied fleet. "The Borg aren't trying to destroy the station, they're trying to capture it. Redirect all available forces to the station's defense. If they access that dimensional technology, we've already lost." The response came not from Admiral Janeway or General Cole, but from Captain Lorca aboard the USS Achilles, and his words carried the weight of inevitable betrayal that Anakin had been expecting since the battle began. "General Skywalker, the Borg have breached the station's outer defenses. They're 30 seconds from accessing the dimensional research cores. Under Starfleet authority, I'm implementing destruction protocols. The station will be destroyed in 60 seconds. All personnel evacuate immediately." "Belay that order," Anakin commanded. "Captain, we can still defend." "No, we can't," Lorca interrupted. "General, I've watched the Borg assimilate entire civilizations. I know what it looks like when they're winning. They're inside your ship. They're inside the station. They're adapting to every defense we deploy. In 60 seconds, that station becomes radioactive debris, or it becomes the Borg's gateway to infinite universes. I'm making the choice Starfleet authorized me to make." Through the Force, Anakin felt the terrible certainty of what was about to happen, felt the photon torpedoes already armed aboard the Achilles, felt the firing solution being calculated, felt 8 months of research, 8 months of hope, 8 months of believing the 501st could find their way home, all about to be reduced to atomic particles. "Master Skywalker," a new voice interrupted. "Commander Satok of the Romulan Tal Shiar," transmitted from his cloaked warbird. "The Tal Shiar has also been authorized to destroy the station if Borg acquisition becomes imminent. However, I am willing to delay implementation if you can provide guarantee that dimensional technology will not be compromised. Can you provide such guarantee?" "Yes," Anakin said, making a decision that would either save the 501st or doom multiple universes. "Dr. Cardell, can you trigger a controlled dimensional rift? Something that would evacuate the research data without destroying the station?" Through the comm, Cardell's voice carried both excitement and terror. "Theoretically, yes. We could create a micro-rift and transmit the data through dimensional space to a secure location. But, General, opening a rift during active Borg assault is insane. If they detect the dimensional breach, they'll redirect all their resources to capturing it. We'd be doing exactly what they want, demonstrating functional dimensional technology in real time." "But it would preserve the research," Anakin pressed. "The data would be safe even if the station falls." "Captain Lorca, Commander Satok, General Cole, I'm asking for 2 minutes. Let Dr. Cardell attempt the data transfer. If it fails, if the Borg capture the Rift technology, then you destroy everything. But give us the chance to save what we've built before deciding that destruction is the only option." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4.7 seconds, an eternity in combat time. "You have 2 minutes," Lorca agreed. But General, if this goes wrong, you're responsible for whatever the Borg do with dimensional technology. That's a burden I wouldn't want to carry. I've been carrying the burden of impossible choices since the Clone Wars began, Anakin replied. One more won't break me. Dr. Cardell, initiate the transfer. What happened next would be debated by physicists across 3 civilizations for decades afterward. Dr. Cardell's team, working under conditions that made desperate seem optimistic, triggered a controlled dimensional rift using the same principles that had brought the 501st to this universe 8 months ago. But instead of allowing it to expand into a full breach, they collapsed it immediately. They're using the 1.3 seconds of rift existence to transmit compressed data through dimensional space to coordinates in the Republic universe that Dr. Cardell had calculated based on their original arrival point. The energy signature was massive, brilliant light erupting from the research station as reality tore and mended, as data encoded in dimensional frequencies passed through the barrier between universes, as 8 months of research vanished into a rift that closed so fast even Borg sensors barely registered what had happened, but they registered enough. Every Borg vessel in the engagement zone, 3 cubes, 18 spheres, and the assimilated drones aboard Allied vessels simultaneously reoriented their priorities. The dimensional rift, brief as it was, had revealed exactly what the Collective wanted most: proof that controlled dimensional travel was possible, that the technology existed, and that Species 11742 possessed the knowledge to breach the barriers between realities. Borg vessels are changing tactics, reported Admiral Yularen from the Invincible. They're disengaging from the fleet, all vessels converging on the Resolute's position. Sir, I think they've designated you as the primary assimilation target. They want the Jedi who just demonstrated dimensional manipulation. Through the Force, Anakin felt the shift in Borg strategy with terrible clarity. They weren't trying to capture the research anymore. They'd seen enough to know the theoretical principles. Now they wanted the practitioners, the Jedi who'd just proven they could create and control dimensional rifts, the Force users whose abilities operated outside conventional physics. They wanted to assimilate Anakin Skywalker, and they were willing to sacrifice everything else to acquire him. General Skywalker. Locutus's voice filled the comm channels, calm and certain. You have demonstrated dimensional manipulation capability. You possess Force abilities that transcend conventional understanding. You are the key to the Collective achieving multiversal perfection. Surrender yourself, and we will cease assault on your allies. Resist, and we will assimilate every being in this fleet to acquire you. You have 60 seconds to decide. Anakin looked around the engineering deck, at Cody holding the line against assimilated clones, at Commander Burnham fighting beside Republic troopers, at the Klingon warrior Kavek, who'd stayed to defend allies despite having no stake in their survival beyond honor, earned through shared combat. He felt through the Force the 10,000 people who'd followed him across universes, who'd trusted his leadership, who'd voted to defend the research station because they believed the 501st stood for something beyond just survival. And he felt Ahsoka's presence through their training bond, felt her absolute certainty that he was about to do something heroically stupid, felt her determination to stand beside him regardless. "Tell the Borg," Anakin said, his voice carrying across every channel, "that if they want a Jedi, they're going to have to take one. And we don't make that easy." The response came not in words, but in action. Every Borg vessel in the engagement zone converging on the Resolute's position with the inexorable certainty of a closing fist. The hunt for Species 11-7-42 had become personal, and the Borg Collective was about to learn that Jedi didn't surrender, even when surrender was the logical choice, even when resistance seemed futile. Especially then. The Battle of Tezra Expanse, as it would be designated in Starfleet tactical archives, reached its crescendo not through grand strategy or technological supremacy, but through the desperate mathematics of forces that refused to accept defeat even when probability calculations proved it inevitable. 3 Borg cubes and 18 spheres converged on the Resolute's position with synchronized precision that made conventional military coordination look primitive. They weren't maneuvering for tactical advantage or preserving forces for future engagements. They were executing an acquisition operation with the single-minded focus that only hive consciousness could achieve. Assimilate Jedi General Anakin Skywalker and the dimensional technology he represented, sir. We're reading massive power buildups across all Borg vessels, Lieutenant Kix reported, his voice tight. They're preparing to use tractor beams simultaneously. If they all lock onto the Resolute at once, we won't have the engine power to break free. They'll pull us apart or drag us straight into a cube for boarding operations. Then we don't let them lock on, Anakin replied, his mind racing through tactical options that all led to the same conclusion. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and running out of time. Helm, emergency warp. Coordinates don't matter. Just get us away from this engagement zone. Sir, we can't abandon the station, protested one of the bridge officers. The station's data is already safe, Anakin replied. Dr. Cardell transmitted it through dimensional space. What's left is infrastructure we can rebuild. What we can't rebuild is the 10,000 people on this ship if the Borg capture us. Helm, execute. The Resolute's warp drive engaged with a scream of overstressed engines, and the Venator-class Star Destroyer leaped to faster-than-light velocity with barely controlled desperation. Behind them, Borg cubes attempted to follow, but their transwarp systems, designed for long-distance strategic movement, couldn't match the immediate tactical jump that Republic and Federation hybrid warp technology had achieved. For exactly 3.7 seconds, it looked like the escape would succeed. Then a Borg sphere that had been positioned along their escape vector simply appeared in their path, having predicted the course correction and moved to intercept before the Resolute had even begun acceleration. Collision imminent, the helm officer shouted. Impact in 4 seconds. Anakin didn't think. He reached out through the Force, not with the careful precision of Jedi meditation, but with the raw desperation of someone who'd spent 3 years in the Clone Wars, learning that sometimes survival required breaking every rule the Jedi Council had ever taught about restraint and emotional control. The Force erupted around the Resolute like an invisible storm. Space-time itself bent under the pressure of will, channeled through midi-chlorians that existed even in this universe where the Force was muted. The Borg sphere, 600 meters of cybernetic technology and assimilated drones, was pushed aside, deflected from collision course by telekinetic force that exceeded anything Anakin had attempted before. The strain was immediate and catastrophic. Anakin felt blood vessels burst in his eyes, and felt his nervous system scream protest at channeling that much power through biological systems not designed to sustain such output. He collapsed to one knee, the force connection snapping closed as his body's survival instincts overrode conscious control. But the Resolute escaped the collision, and every sensor in the engagement zone, Republic, Federation, Klingon, Romulan, and Borg, had just recorded a Jedi using the Force to physically move a 600-meter starship out of the way through nothing but concentrated willpower. "Master!" Ahsoka was at his side, her hands glowing with force-healing energy as she tried to mitigate the damage. "You can't do that again. That kind of power output, you could kill yourself." "Worth it if it saved the ship," Anakin gasped, feeling the migraine building behind his eyes that signaled severe force exhaustion. "Status? We're clear of the immediate engagement zone," Admiral Yularen reported. "But sir, the Borg are pursuing, all vessels converging on our position, and the rest of the Allied fleet. They're attempting to intercept the Borg pursuit, but they're outnumbered and outgunned." Through the viewport, Anakin watched the battle unfold with the terrible clarity that came from observing tactical disaster from a distance. The combined Federation Klingon-Romulan fleet was fighting desperately to slow the Borg pursuit, their ships forming a defensive line that should have been impenetrable but which the Borg simply ignored. Cubes and spheres pushed through the defensive formation, accepting damage that would have crippled conventional vessels, their regenerative systems repairing hull breaches even as new weapons fire carved fresh wounds. They weren't fighting to destroy the Allied fleet. They were treating them as obstacles to be bypassed on the way to their actual objective. General Skywalker, Captain Lorca's transmission came through, his ship now bearing catastrophic damage from holding the line. "You need to get out of this system. The Borg have designated you as primary target. Every second you remain, you're putting the entire fleet at risk. Jump to warp, get somewhere they can't follow, and let us handle the cleanup." "Captain's right, sir," Rex added, his tactical assessment cutting through the emotional weight of abandoning allies. "We can't win this engagement. Best we can do is preserve the fleet by removing the target they're pursuing." But tactically sound withdrawal isn't cowardice. It's recognizing when continued engagement serves no purpose except getting everyone killed. Anakin wanted to argue, wanted to invoke the Jedi principle of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, wanted to be the hero who stayed and fought impossible battles because that's what heroes did. But he wasn't just a hero, he was a general. And generals made decisions that heroes didn't have to face. Decisions about acceptable losses and strategic withdrawal and choosing which people would die so others could survive. "Helm, prepare for extended warp jump," Anakin ordered, the words tasting like ashes. "Coordinates?" "Sir, incoming transmission from General Cole," interrupted the communications officer. "He's requesting you hold position." The Klingon general's face appeared on screen, and despite the battle raging around his vessel, Cole's expression carried something approaching fierce joy. "General Skywalker, you have given me the greatest gift a warrior can receive," Cole stated. "You have provided an enemy worthy of glorious combat and a cause worth dying for. The Empire debates honor versus pragmatism, glory versus survival. But you demonstrate that honor and survival are not contradictions, that fighting for allies is itself strategic victory. House de Gore will hold the line while you escape, not because Klingons are expendable, but because protecting warriors worth respecting is honor that transcends individual survival. General Cole, you can't hold 3 Borg cubes alone, Anakin protested. Who said alone? Cole replied, and his tactical display revealed what he meant. 6 additional Klingon battlecruisers dropped out of warp at the engagement zone's edge. Not the vessels Cole had brought, but reinforcements from other houses who'd decided that defending dimensional research and alliance with species 11742 served Klingon interests better than observing from safety. But that wasn't all. 4 more Federation starships arrived, commanded by captains who'd served under Admiral Janeway and who'd decided that Starfleet's mission to defend Federation citizens extended to defending dimensional refugees who'd saved Federation colonies. And even 3 additional Romulan warbirds decloaked, their commanders apparently calculating that preventing Borg acquisition of dimensional technology was worth temporary alliance with traditional enemies. You have allies, General Skywalker, Cole continued. More than you knew, more than we knew ourselves. Now demonstrate that you are worth what we are about to sacrifice. Escape, survive, and remember that warriors died here not for strategic advantage, but because some things transcend calculation. Go. The transmission ended, and Anakin stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching through the viewport as ships from 3 different civilizations formed a defensive perimeter that should have been impossible. Klingon aggression, Federation coordination, and Romulan cunning creating a whole that was somehow more than the sum of its parts. They were buying time, buying it with ships, with lives, with the blood of crews who'd chosen to stand between the Borg and their allies, even when logic said retreat served better interests. Helm, Anakin said quietly, execute warp jump, maximum distance, and make sure we remember every ship, every captain, every crew member who made this possible, because when we come back, and we will come back, we're making sure their sacrifice meant something. The Resolute jumped to warp, leaving the Battle of Tezra Expanse behind. But the battle itself raged for another 4 hours. The after-action reports would document what happened in clinical terms. The Allied fleet engaged 3 Borg cubes and 18 spheres in a defensive action designed to cover the withdrawal of high-value targets. Casualties were severe but strategically acceptable given the objectives achieved. Borg forces withdrew after acquiring sufficient tactical data for future encounters, but those reports wouldn't capture what it actually meant. The USS Achilles, Captain Lorca commanding, held position directly in the path of the lead Borg cube until its shields collapsed and Borg drones began boarding operations. Lorca initiated self-destruct, taking his ship, 317 crew members, and a significant section of the cube's surface into explosive oblivion rather than allow Starfleet's anti-Borg modifications to be assimilated. The IKS Bortus, General Cole commanding, engaged in ramming speed against a Borg sphere that was attempting to pursue the Resolute through the warp corridor. The collision destroyed both vessels, but Cole's final transmission was a battle cry that other Klingon captains would quote for generations. Today is a good day to die, for the Empire, for honor, for warriors worth protecting. The RIS Valdor, Commander Satuk commanding, used its cloaking device not to escape, but to position for a suicide run directly into a Borg cube's power core. The resulting cascade failure disabled the cube completely, but the Warbird and its crew of 87 were vaporized in the explosion. Ship after ship, captain after captain, crew after crew, not because they'd been ordered to sacrifice themselves, but because they'd chosen to. When the Borg finally withdrew, not defeated, but having determined that the cost of continued pursuit exceeded the value of immediate acquisition, the Allied fleet had been reduced from 32 vessels to 11. Casualty counts exceeded 6,000 killed, twice that wounded, and damage assessments suggested that several surviving ships would require months of repair before returning to service. The Dimensional Research Station was destroyed, not by Federation torpedoes, but by Borg cutting beams that reduced it to atomic debris when it became clear the data had already been evacuated, and the Resolute, carrying General Anakin Skywalker and the 501st Legion, was 13 light-years away, hidden in a nebula that disrupted sensor scans, trying to process what their survival had cost. Anakin stood in the Resolute's Memorial Hall, a space that the 501st had created 8 months ago to honor clone troopers and Republic personnel who died since arriving in this universe. Now, holographic names scrolled across the walls in multiple languages: Basic, Federation Standard, Klingon, and even Romulan. Captain Gabriel Lorca, USS Achilles, General Cole, IKS Bordas, Commander Satuk, RIS Valdor, and hundreds more. People from 3 civilizations who died defending dimensional refugees they'd been enemies with months ago. Master, Ahsoka said quietly, joining him in the memorial hall. Admiral Yularen has compiled preliminary casualty assessments. 6,342 confirmed dead, most of them defending us, defending your decision to preserve the dimensional research instead of destroying it preemptively. I know, Anakin replied, and if I could go back, if I could make a different choice. You'd make the same one, Ahsoka finished, because you're you. Because you believe some things are worth fighting for, even when the costs seem unbearable. Master, I'm not judging that decision. I voted to defend the station too. But those people died because we chose hope over certainty, because we believed getting home was worth the risks. And now we need to decide if we still believe that, if the dimensional research we saved is worth what we paid to preserve it. Through the Force, Anakin felt the weight of that question pressing down like physical mass. Dr. Cardell's data had been transmitted through dimensional space to coordinates in the Republic universe, but they had no way of knowing if it had arrived, if anyone had received it, if the information had survived the transit intact. They'd sacrificed thousands of lives for data that might be lost in the spaces between realities. The Borg are hunting us, Anakin said. Locutus made that clear. They've designated me as priority assimilation target because I demonstrated dimensional manipulation. They won't stop until they've either assimilated me or determined I'm no longer accessible. That means the 501st has become a liability to everyone else. The Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans, they all helped us today, and all we've given them in return is making them targets for Borg attention. So what do we do? Ahsoka challenged. Surrender? Let the Borg assimilate you to protect everyone else? Master, that's not an option. The 501st doesn't sacrifice commanders to enemy assimilation just because it's strategically convenient. No, Anakin agreed, but we also don't stay here making everyone around us vulnerable to Borg attacks designed to capture us. We need to find somewhere the Borg can't easily reach. Somewhere we can continue the dimensional research without bringing down the collective on whatever allies we've accumulated. Somewhere. General Skywalker, Rex's voice interrupted through the comm system. We're receiving a transmission. Sir, it's from the Borg. They want to negotiate. Anakin and Ahsoka exchanged glances, confusion mixed with suspicion. The Borg didn't negotiate. They assimilated. The entire concept of diplomatic communication with the collective contradicted everything they'd learned about how the hive mind operated. On the bridge, Locutus's face appeared on the view screen, but this time the Borg drone's expression carried something that might have been calculation, strategic thinking that went beyond simple acquisition programming. General Anakin Skywalker, Locutus stated, the collective has analyzed the engagement at Tezra Expanse. You demonstrated capabilities we cannot easily assimilate through conventional means, force manipulation that transcends technological understanding, dimensional abilities that operate outside physics we have encountered across thousands of assimilated species. You are resistant to assimilation in ways we did not anticipate. Good, Anakin replied, then leave us alone. That is not acceptable, Locutus continued. But neither is continued military engagement that produces suboptimal resource expenditure for minimal acquisition probability. The collective therefore proposes alternative approach. You will surrender yourself voluntarily for assimilation. In exchange, we will provide your dimensional research data to the Republic universe, ensuring your people can return home. You sacrifice individual existence to achieve collective objective that matters to your subordinates. This is logical. This is efficient. This serves both our objectives. The silence on the bridge was absolute. The Borg were offering a deal, Anakin's assimilation in exchange for guaranteed delivery of the dimensional research to the Republic, ensuring the 501st could go home even if their general couldn't join them. It was the most horrifying proposal Anakin had ever received. And through the Force, he could feel that Locutus was genuinely presenting it as logical solution to strategic problem. The Borg thought they were being reasonable, and that was somehow worse than if they'd just been threatening. The Borg's negotiation hung in the air like a death sentence delivered with mathematical precision. Every person on the Resolute's bridge understood exactly what Locutus was proposing. Trade one life for 10,000, sacrifice the general to save the army, accept assimilation to guarantee that the dimensional research reached the Republic and the 501st could go home. It was logical, efficient, strategically optimal, and absolutely unacceptable. No, Rex stated before Anakin could respond, his voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who'd made a decision that transcended military protocol. General, with respect, the answer is no. The 501st doesn't trade commanders for strategic advantage. We don't calculate acceptable casualties when those casualties include people who've led us through 3 years of war and 8 months in hostile universe. Sir, I'm speaking for every clone trooper in this fleet when I say we'd rather spend the rest of our lives stranded here than watch you get assimilated by machines that erase everything that makes you human. Rex is right, Ahsoka added, her voice carrying the fierce protectiveness that came from years as Anakin's Padawan. Master, you taught me that some things matter more than strategic calculations, that people are worth more than the objectives they serve. If you surrender to the Borg, you're contradicting everything the 501st stands for, and worse, you'd be doing exactly what the Jedi Council would want. Sacrificing yourself for the greater good, while ignoring that maybe people need their general more than they need guaranteed passage home. Through the Force, Anakin felt the absolute conviction radiating from his bridge crew, felt Admiral Yularen's quiet agreement, felt the clone troopers throughout the ship who were listening to this conversation and silently echoing Rex's refusal, felt even Commander Burnham's determination that whatever alliance she'd formed with the 501st, it didn't include accepting Borg deals that treated people as tradable assets. Locutus, Anakin said, turning back to the view screen where the assimilated human waited with mechanical patience. Your offer is refused. The 501st doesn't surrender personnel to enemy assimilation under any circumstances. Find another way to achieve perfection, one that doesn't require destroying individual consciousness. Your response is illogical, Locutus replied. You prioritize one individual's continued existence over 10,000 individuals' ability to return to their origin universe. This contradicts optimal resource allocation. The collective does not understand why biological attachment supersedes strategic advantage. That's because you're a hive mind that doesn't understand what individuality means, Anakin replied. You see people as components, as resources to be acquired and deployed according to efficiency calculations. But we're not components, Locutus. We're individuals who value each other beyond what we can contribute to strategic objectives. And if you can't understand that, if the collective genuinely cannot process why we'd refuse your logical offer, then you've proven exactly why assimilation is something worth resisting, even when resistance seems futile. For exactly 3.2 seconds, Locutus was silent, an eternity for a hive mind that operated at computational speeds organic brains couldn't match. Your perspective has been noted and analyzed, Locutus finally stated. The collective recognizes that Species 11-7-42 operates according to principles that diverge from optimal efficiency. This makes you interesting, valuable beyond mere technological acquisition. We will continue to pursue your assimilation, General Skywalker, but we will do so through methods that account for your species' attachment to individual existence. This conversation is concluded. We are Borg. The transmission ended, and Anakin felt through the Force that something fundamental had just shifted in how the Borg perceived the 501st. They were no longer just another species to be assimilated through standard protocols. They'd become a puzzle, a challenge that the collective would approach with the same methodical precision they applied to everything, but with recognition that conventional tactics had failed. Sir, what just happened? Lieutenant Kix asked, confusion evident in his voice. Did the Borg just give up on immediate assimilation? Are they actually going to let us go? No, Anakin replied, studying the empty view screen where Locatus had been moments ago. They're adapting, not their shields or their weapons, their strategy. We've shown them that standard Borg tactics don't work against Force users and Republic military doctrine, so they're going to analyze, recalculate, and come back with new approach. The question is what that approach looks like and how much time we have before they implement it. Then we use that time, Admiral Yularen stated, pulling up star charts on the tactical display. General, the Borg have made clear they're hunting us specifically. That makes the 501st a threat to any system we operate in. We need to find somewhere we can continue dimensional research without endangering civilian populations or putting allies at risk. Somewhere remote enough that Borg pursuit doesn't threaten major powers. The Badlands, Commander Burnham suggested, highlighting a region on the Federation star charts. It's a massive area of plasma storms and unstable space phenomena near the Cardassian border. Federation ships avoid it because the conditions make navigation nearly impossible. But if your ships can handle it, and if the dimensional research might actually benefit from the exotic physics in that region, it could provide months or even years of concealment while you work on getting home. What about the Cardassians? Anakin asked. We operate near their territory. We're creating new political complications. The Cardassian Union is occupied with internal political restructuring after their defeat in the Dominion War, Burnham explained. They're not in position to challenge a military force as powerful as the 501st. And honestly, if the Borg are hunting you, the Cardassians will probably be grateful you're keeping the Collective's attention focused somewhere that isn't their space. The strategic calculation was sound. The Badlands offered concealment, exotic physics that might accelerate dimensional research, and isolation from major powers that the 501st had already endangered through Borg attention. But it also meant accepting that they'd become pariahs, too dangerous to operate openly, too valuable to the Borg to risk integration with allied civilizations, reduced to hiding in the margins of known space while trying to solve theoretical physics problems that could take years or decades. We vote, Anakin decided, maintaining the democratic principles the 501st had established. Everyone gets a say. Do we retreat to the Badlands and continue dimensional research in isolation? Or do we accept that going home might not be possible and focus on building permanent life in this universe? The vote took 8 hours to complete, and the results reflected how the Battle of Tezra Expanse had changed the 501st's perspective. Continue dimensional research in the Badlands. 6,247 votes, 63.4%. Accept permanent residence in Star Trek universe, 2,891 votes, 29.3%. Abstain, 709 votes, 7.2%. Then we go to the Badlands, Anakin announced. And we finish what we started 8 months ago. We find a way home, not because it's easy, not because it's guaranteed, but because 6,000 people died buying us the time to preserve that possibility. We owe it to Captain Lorca, to General Cole, to Commander Satok, and to every crew member who sacrificed themselves at Tezra Expanse to make their deaths mean something. 3 weeks later, the Badlands lived up to their reputation, Plasma storms that could disintegrate unshielded vessels raged across cubic light-years of space. Gravimetric distortions created regions where the normal laws of physics broke down, and strange energy phenomena that Federation science had never adequately explained created an environment that was simultaneously deadly and fascinating. The 501st had established a hidden base inside a massive asteroid that the plasma storms had hollowed out over millennia. Republic engineering had converted it into a fortified research facility that could sustain 10,000 people indefinitely, and Dr. Cardell's team expanded with the few Federation, Klingon, and Romulan scientists who'd volunteered to join the dimensional research effort was making progress that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. "We're detecting resonance patterns," Dr. Cardell explained during the briefing with senior staff. Her eyes still glowed with that red luminescence, but now it seemed less like corruption and more like adaptation, as if the dimensional exposure had genuinely transformed her into something between normal human and something that existed partially outside standard space-time. She pulled up holographic displays showing complex mathematical models. "The Badlands exotic physics are actually accelerating our research. The plasma storms create micro-rifts constantly, tiny breaches in dimensional barriers that we can analyze and learn from. We've made more progress in 3 weeks here than we made in 6 months at the previous station. General Skywalker, I think we can create a stable dimensional portal within 4 months, maybe 6. A gateway that could send the entire 501st Fleet home." The hope in her voice was matched by the hope Anakin felt through the Force from everyone in the briefing room. 4 months, 6 months maximum, a definitive timeline for return instead of the vague someday that had sustained them through 8 months of exile. "What's the catch?" Anakin asked, because he'd learned that good news in this universe always came with complications. "The portal will only remain stable for approximately 90 seconds, Cardell admitted. "That's the maximum duration we can sustain the dimensional breach before it collapses. Every ship in the fleet will need to transit through the gateway within that window or be stranded. And General, once we activate the portal, the dimensional energy signature will be massive. Every sensor in this sector will detect it, including Borg sensors." "So we get one shot," Rex summarized. 90 seconds to get the entire fleet through the gateway before it closes. And during those 90 seconds, we'll be broadcasting our location to every Borg cube within 20 light years. That's not a rescue operation. That's a race against assimilation. "Can we improve the stability?" Anakin pressed. "Extend the portal duration to give us more margin for error?" "Not without risk of catastrophic dimensional collapse," Cardell replied. "General, we're forcing a breach between universes that aren't supposed to touch. The math is delicate. Push too hard, and instead of controlled portal, we create expanding rift that could consume this entire region of space. We need to accept that 90 seconds is the maximum safe operational window." Anakin studied the projections, calculating fleet transit times and recognizing that 90 seconds would require perfect coordination and 0 technical failures. If even one ship experienced engine trouble or navigation errors, they'd have to choose: abort the entire operation to go back for stragglers, or leave people behind. "We practice," Anakin decided. "Starting tomorrow, we run transit drills. Every ship, every pilot, every crew member needs to know exactly where they're supposed to be and when. We simulate the portal activation 100 times until we can do it in our sleep. And we prepare contingency plans for what happens if the Borg detect the dimensional signature and arrive before we can complete transit. The training that followed consumed the next 3 months. The 501st drilled relentlessly. Fleet positioning, transit sequences, emergency protocols for every scenario they could imagine. Clone troopers who'd been trained for ground combat learned starship operations so they could serve as backup crews if casualties required personnel replacement. Jedi practiced using the Force to enhance navigation precision beyond what conventional systems could achieve. And Dr. Cardell's team refined the dimensional technology, testing microportals that lasted fractions of seconds, mapping the theoretical framework that would allow controlled breach between universes, and preparing for the moment when theory would become reality. But during the 12th week in the Badlands, something happened that changed everything. A Federation starship arrived at their hidden base, not through conventional navigation, but by following a signal that had been transmitted from the Republic universe through dimensional space. The USS Defiant, a small, heavily armed vessel designed for combat operations, dropped out of warp at the asteroid base's coordinates and transmitted a message that made Anakin's blood run cold. "This is Captain Benjamin Sisko of the USS Defiant. I'm carrying a data package that was received at Deep Space Nine 3 months ago. The transmission came through a spatial anomaly near the Bajoran wormhole and was identified as Republic military encryption. General Skywalker, I think your dimensional research reached its destination, and I think the Republic is trying to respond." The data package that Captain Sisko delivered contained encrypted files that required Republic military codes to access. When Dr. Cardell finally cracked the encryption, what they found made the 3 months of preparation suddenly feel inadequate. The dimensional research data they'd transmitted during the Battle of Tezra Expanse had arrived in Republic space exactly where Dr. Cardell had calculated, received by a Republic listening post that had forwarded it to Coruscant, where Jedi Council and Republic military intelligence had been analyzing it for 3 months, and they'd sent a response. A compressed data package containing updated star charts of Republic space, current Clone Wars tactical situation, and, most critically, precise coordinates for where the 501st should create their dimensional portal to ensure arrival in friendly territory, rather than randomly emerging in the middle of Separatist-controlled systems. But the message also contained warning. The Clone Wars continue. Casualties exceed projections. The Republic needs the 501st. But be advised, Count Dooku has learned of your disappearance and is attempting to track dimensional technology for Separatist use. Return with caution. Return with understanding that you may be coming back to galaxy more dangerous than the one you left. But return. The Republic needs its heroes. Jedi Council. Anakin read the message 3 times, feeling through the Force the weight of what it meant. The Republic wanted them back, needed them back, was providing coordinates to make return possible. But they were also warning that coming home meant returning to war, to conflict that had only intensified during the 8 months the 501st had been stranded, to dangers that included Separatists attempting to acquire the same dimensional technology that the Borg were hunting. "Master," Ahsoka said quietly, reading the message over his shoulder. "We've spent 8 months fighting to get home. Now we have coordinates, we have timeline. We have everything we need to make the portal work. But coming back to the Clone Wars means we're walking right back into the conflict we were pulled out of. Some of the troops are going to question whether that's better than staying here, where at least we're not fighting galactic war." "Then we let them choose," Anakin replied. "One final vote. Not about whether we try to go home, we've already committed to that, but about whether each individual wants to make the transit when we activate the portal. Anyone who wants to stay in this universe, who's built life here, or who thinks the Clone Wars isn't worth returning to, they can choose that. No judgment, no condemnation, just respect for individual choice about which future they want." The final vote was conducted 1 week before the scheduled portal activation. Every member of the 501st, clone troopers, naval personnel, civilian researchers, and even the Federation and Klingon volunteers who joined their cause, registered their decision. Transit through portal to Republic Universe. 8,934 votes, 90.7%. Remain in Star Trek Universe, 847 votes, 8.6%. Undecided, 66 votes, 0.7%. 9,000 people had chosen to go home. The 800 had chosen to stay. And in 2 days, they'd find out if the dimensional technology they'd fought so hard to preserve could actually deliver on its promise, or if the Borg would arrive first. The morning of the portal activation arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that only came in moments before everything either worked perfectly or failed catastrophically. The 501st Fleet hung in formation near the hollow asteroid that had been their home for 3 months. Every ship positioned according to mathematical calculations that allowed zero margin for error. Anakin stood on the Resolute's bridge, watching the chrono count down final minutes before Dr. Cardell initiated the dimensional breach. Around him, the bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, clone officers conducting final systems checks, Admiral Yularen coordinating fleet positioning through channels that connected Republic, Federation, and even a few Klingon vessels that had chosen to accompany the 501st back to their universe. General, Rex reported from Tactical. All ships confirm ready status. Transit order established. The Resolute will go through last to ensure every other vessel makes the crossing safely. Sir, we're actually doing this. After 8 months, we're going home. Through the Force, Anakin felt the hope and anxiety radiating from 10,000 people who'd voted to risk everything on 90 seconds of dimensional travel that might kill them, might strand them between universes, or might deliver them back to the Republic they'd left behind. Dr. Cardell, Anakin transmitted to the research facility deep inside the asteroid. Final status on the portal. Cardell's face appeared on screen, her red luminescent eyes blazing with fierce determination. All systems nominal, dimensional calculations aligned with Republic coordinates, energy reserves at maximum. General, I'm as confident as I can be that this will work, which is to say about 73% certain we won't create catastrophic rift that consumes this entire sector. Those are good odds for experimental dimensional physics. Comforting, Anakin replied dryly. Initiate activation sequence on my mark. And Doctor, Whatever happens in the next 90 seconds, thank you for everything you've done to get us this far. Thank me when we're safely back in Republic space, Cardell replied. Activation sequence ready, standing by for your command. Anakin took a breath, reaching out through the Force to feel the currents of probability and danger that surrounded this moment. He felt the massive dimensional energies building inside the asteroid as Cardell's equipment prepared to tear a hole between universes, felt the anticipation from every ship in the fleet, felt Ahsoka's presence beside him, steady and certain despite the fear she was carefully shielding from their training bond. And he felt something else, a disturbance in the Force, like ripples spreading across still water, something vast and cold approaching through space with mathematical precision. Sir, long-range sensors detecting transwarp signatures, Lieutenant Kix reported, his voice tight with recognition. Multiple contacts, configuration matches. Sir, it's Borg cubes, 3 of them, distance 47 million kilometers and closing. They'll reach our position in approximately 8 minutes. The bridge went silent except for the sound of systems operating and the chrono counting down. The Borg had found them, not through conventional tracking, but through detecting the dimensional energy building for portal activation, exactly as Dr. Cardell had warned. 8 minutes until the Borg arrived. 90 seconds for fleet transit. The math was brutally simple. They needed to activate the portal, get every ship through and collapse the dimensional breach before the Borg could reach them and attempt assimilation, or worse, try to follow the 500 first through the portal into the Republic universe. All ships, this is General Skywalker, Anakin transmitted across the fleet. Borg cubes are inbound. We're proceeding with portal activation as scheduled. Transit order remains unchanged. Every ship goes through exactly as planned. We don't panic, we don't rush, and we don't give the Borg the satisfaction of making us abandon people because we're scared. Execute the plan. Trust your training, and remember, we've survived 8 months in this universe through refusing to accept that resistance is futile. We're not starting now. Aye, sir, the response echoed across multiple channels. Clone troopers, Federation officers, Klingon warriors, Romulan defectors, all united in determination to complete transit before the Borg could stop them. Dr. Cardell, Anakin commanded, activate the portal now. The dimensional breach began with light, brilliant, impossible light that burned in colors human eyes weren't designed to process. The fabric of space-time tore like cloth, creating a wound in reality that connected this universe to the Republic galaxy, across distances that conventional physics said couldn't be traversed. Through the viewport, Anakin watched as the portal stabilized into a swirling vortex of energy that looked like a wormhole but which operated on completely different principles. Through the Force, he could sense the other side, could feel the familiar presence of Republic space, could sense the Clone Wars still raging, could even detect the faint echoes of Jedi he'd known scattered across battlefields throughout the galaxy. Home. After 8 months, it was finally within reach. Portal stable, Cardell reported. Dimensional breach holding at 92% integrity. You have approximately 87 seconds before collapse becomes unavoidable. Begin transit. The first wave of ships, Acclamator-class assault vessels, and smaller Republic cruisers accelerated toward the portal with engines at maximum burn. One by one, they disappeared into the swirling energy, their sensor signatures vanishing from this universe and, according to the telemetry Cardell was receiving, reappearing in Republic space at the coordinates the Jedi Council had provided. It was working. "Second wave, execute," Admiral Yularen commanded, and more ships followed, Federation vessels that had chosen to accompany the 501st. Klingon birds of prey whose crews sought glory in exploring another universe, even a Romulan science vessel whose commander had become fascinated by dimensional physics and wanted to study the Republic firsthand. 62 seconds remaining. Third wave transiting. 51 seconds. Fourth wave away. Then everything went wrong. "Sir, one of the acclimator vessels, the Steadfast, is reporting engine failure," Kix shouted. "They're drifting out of formation. If they don't correct course in the next 30 seconds, they'll miss the portal entirely." Through the Force, Anakin felt the 700 souls aboard the Steadfast, clone troopers, naval personnel, civilians who'd voted to go home and who were now facing the nightmare of being stranded because of mechanical failure at the worst possible moment. "Can they restart engines in time?" Anakin demanded. "Negative, sir," Yularen replied. "Engineering reports catastrophic failure in the primary drive system. They'd need 15 minutes minimum to implement repairs." We have 43 seconds before portal collapse. The choice crystallized with terrible clarity. Continue the transit and leave the Steadfast behind, or delay the operation to go back for them and risk the entire fleet being caught when the Borg arrived. 700 people versus 9,000. Strategic calculation versus loyalty to every individual. Acceptable losses versus refusing to abandon anyone. "How long until the Borg reach us?" Anakin asked. 4 minutes 37 seconds, Kix replied. "And how long to tow the Steadfast to the portal using tractor beams?" "Approximately 3 minutes if we divert the Invincible from transit sequence," Yularen calculated. "But General, that means the Invincible and the Resolute would be the last ships through. If the portal collapses early or the Borg arrive faster than projected, then we deal with it," Anakin interrupted. "Rex, signal the Invincible. Have them break formation and tow the Steadfast to the portal. All other ships continue transit as planned. We're not leaving anyone behind." "Sir, that's tactically unsound," Rex protested. "We're risking 2 capital ships and their crews to save 1 damaged vessel. The mathematics don't account for what the 501st stands for," Anakin replied. "We came to this universe together. We're going home together, all of us. Execute the order, Commander." The Invincible, Plo Koon commanding, broke from the transit queue and accelerated toward the drifting Steadfast. Tractor beams locked onto the disabled vessel, and the Venator-class destroyer began pulling it toward the portal, with engines screaming at emergency power. 38 seconds remaining. The 5th wave transited successfully. 31 seconds. The 6th wave disappeared into the portal. 24 seconds. "Sir, the Borg cubes are accelerating," Kix reported. "They've detected what we're doing. They're trying to reach us before we complete transit. New arrival time, 2 minutes 47 seconds. 18 seconds remaining." The Invincible and Steadfast were still 300,000 kilometers from the portal, moving as fast as tractor beam-assisted propulsion could manage, but not fast enough to make the window. 12 seconds. "Dr. Cardell, can you extend portal stability?" Anakin demanded. Negative, Cardell's voice carried desperation. The dimensional breach is already fluctuating. If I try to extend duration, we risk catastrophic collapse that could trap ships halfway between universes. General, you need to make a choice. I've made my choice, Anakin stated. He reached out through the Force, feeling the massive energies of the dimensional portal, feeling the fabric of space-time straining under the breach, feeling the mathematical certainty that the portal would collapse in exactly 9 seconds. And he did what Jedi weren't supposed to do, what the Council had warned against, what his training had cautioned would lead to the dark side if pursued without restraint. He used the Force to manipulate reality itself. The dimensional portal flared with additional energy that came from neither technology nor physics, but from the cosmic power that bound all living things across all universes. Anakin felt his consciousness expand beyond his body, felt himself become temporarily part of the dimensional breach, felt the terrible strain of channeling forces that organic beings weren't designed to sustain. The portal stabilized, not through engineering or mathematics, but through sheer Force-assisted willpower, refusing to let it collapse. 10 seconds extension, Cardell reported, shock evident in her voice. I don't know how that's possible, but the portal's holding. General, whatever you're doing, maintain it for 19 more seconds. The invincible and steadfast crossed the threshold and disappeared into the swirling energy. The last ships of the fleet followed, and suddenly only the Resolute remained, alone in the Badlands with 3 Borg cubes closing to within visual range. All personnel, prepare for transit, Anakin commanded, feeling blood running from his nose as the Force strain exceeded safe limits. Helm, maximum acceleration directly at the portal. We go through fast and we go through now. The Resolute surged forward with engines pushed past safety parameters. The massive Venator-class destroyer accelerating toward the dimensional breach with desperate speed. 3 seconds from portal entry, the Borg cubes opened fire, not with cutting beams or tractor beams, but with something new. Energy weapons that phased across dimensional frequencies, designed to disrupt the portal itself and trap the Resolute in this universe where the Collective could continue pursuit. 2 seconds. The portal began to collapse under the Borg assault, the dimensional energies destabilizing as exotic weapons tore at the fabric of space-time. 1 second. Anakin released his Force grip on the portal, letting the collapse accelerate, trusting that momentum would carry the Resolute through before the breach closed completely. The ship entered the dimensional vortex. Reality inverted. Space became non-space, became space again, and the Resolute emerged in the Republic universe with alarms blaring and systems failing and hull integrity at 63%, but fundamentally intact. They'd made it. They were home. The Republic listening post that received them was a small military installation on the edge of known space, exactly where the Jedi Council's coordinates had indicated. And waiting for them, standing on the observation deck of the station with her distinctive montrals marking her as Togruta, was Jedi Master Shaak Ti. General Skywalker, Shaak Ti transmitted as the battered 501st Fleet approached the station. Welcome home. The Jedi Council has been monitoring the dimensional coordinates for 3 months, hoping you'd successfully create the portal. She paused, emotion breaking through Jedi composure. We thought you were dead, Anakin. The entire task force. lost during the Battle of Raxus Secundus, to discover you were merely stranded in another universe and that you fought your way back. The Council will want full debriefing immediately. Through the Force, Anakin felt the familiar presence of Republic space settling around him like a comfortable cloak, felt the distant echoes of the Clone Wars still raging across the galaxy, felt the dark side corruption that suggested the Sith were closer than the Jedi suspected. And he felt something else, a warning whisper that the dimensional technology they'd brought back, the experiences they'd accumulated, the allies they'd made in the Star Trek universe, all of it would matter more than anyone realized. Because somewhere in the Outer Rim, Count Dooku was analyzing the same dimensional research that had brought the 501st home. And the Separatists were about to discover that two universes at war created opportunities for chaos that even the Sith hadn't fully anticipated. Master Shaak Ti, Anakin replied, "We need to establish quarantine protocols immediately." The 501st made contact with a species called the Borg in the other universe, cybernetic organisms that assimilate biological and technological distinctiveness. I don't believe they followed us through the portal, but we need to ensure no Borg technology or nanoprobes contaminated our vessels during the engagements. Already implemented, Shaak Ti confirmed. The Council anticipated potential contamination risks. All returning vessels will undergo full decontamination before personnel are cleared for General Republic integration. General, there's something else. The Supreme Chancellor wants to meet with you personally to discuss what you encountered, what you learned, and how dimensional technology might be deployed in service of the Republic's war effort. Anakin felt a chill run through the Force. Chancellor Palpatine, who the 501st had seen in holographic recording giving orders to Count Dooku, who might be connected to the Sith, who represented everything about Republic politics that Anakin had learned to distrust during 8 months away, wanted to discuss dimensional technology. "Tell the Chancellor I'll report as protocol requires," Anakin replied carefully. "But Master Shaak Ti, the dimensional technology is dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could enable invasions across infinite realities. The 501st needs to establish security protocols that prevent unauthorized access before we share technical specifications with anyone, including the Chancellor." Through the transmission, Anakin saw Shaak Ti's expression shift to something that might have been approval. "The Council agrees," Shaak Ti confirmed. "Whatever you learned during your time away, General Skywalker, it's made you more cautious about institutional authority. That's probably wise. Come to Coruscant when you're ready. The Republic has missed its hero with no fear, but I suspect you've returned as someone more complex than the general who disappeared 8 months ago." The transmission ended, and Anakin stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking out at Republic space that was simultaneously familiar and alien after 8 months in a universe where the rules had been different. They were home. But home had changed, and they'd changed. And the question now was whether the lessons they'd learned about resistance, about individuality, about refusing to accept that any form of oppression was inevitable, whether those lessons would help the Republic win the Clone Wars or complicate it in ways that no one had anticipated. The 501st Legion had returned, and the galaxy was about to discover that soldiers who'd fought the Borg didn't surrender easily to anyone. Not the Separatists, not the Sith, not even the Republic itself. The quarantine facility on the Republic listening post was designed for biological containment. Sterile chambers where personnel could be examined for infectious diseases or exotic pathogens before being cleared for general population integration. But the protocols Dr. Cardell had convinced the Jedi Council to implement went far beyond standard medical screening. Every clone trooper, every naval officer, every civilian researcher who'd made the dimensional transit was being scanned with technology that combined Republic medical systems and equipment that Cardell's team had developed specifically to detect Borg nanoprobes, microscopic machines that could lie dormant in biological tissue for weeks before activating and beginning assimilation. "Gear clear," reported the medical droid examining Clone Trooper 5s for the third time in as many hours. No foreign technological signatures, no unusual cybernetic implants, no indication of Borg contamination. You're approved for release from quarantine, Trooper. 5 stood from the examination table, his expression carrying the particular relief of someone who'd been terrified they might be carrying assimilation technology without knowing it. "Thanks, Doc. How many more scans do we need before the Republic stops treating us like we're walking plague vectors?" "Regulatory protocols require 72 hours of continuous monitoring," the droid replied with mechanical precision. "You've completed 47 hours. 25 hours remaining until full clearance for Republic integration." Throughout the facility, similar scenes were playing out as the 8,934 personnel who'd made the transit underwent the kind of exhaustive screening that Republic military had never implemented before. But Anakin had insisted, had personally briefed the Jedi Council on exactly what the Borg were capable of and what would happen if even one nanoprobe made it into Republic population. One infected person could create exponential spread, Anakin explained during his report to the Council via holographic transmission. The Borg assimilation process is designed to be viral. Each drone can create more drones, who create more drones until entire populations are consumed. We encountered species in the Star Trek universe who'd been completely assimilated within weeks. The Republic has 3 billion humans across thousands of systems. If Borg contamination reaches Coruscant or other core worlds, we understand the stakes, General Skywalker, Mace Windu interrupted, his expression showing the strain of processing information about threats the Jedi Order had never encountered. Your quarantine protocols are prudent and will be maintained, but we also need to discuss the dimensional technology itself. The ability to create portals between universes. That's power beyond anything the Republic has possessed. It could end the Clone Wars if deployed strategically. Through the Force, Anakin felt the dangerous direction this conversation was heading. The Council saw dimensional technology as weapon, a way to outmaneuver the Separatists, to access resources from parallel realities to potentially eliminate enemies by banishing them to hostile universes. Masters, Anakin said carefully, the dimensional technology is experimental, dangerous, and attracts the attention of beings you don't want to encounter. In the Star Trek universe, we fought creatures called void stalkers, extra-dimensional predators that hunt dimensional rifts. We barely survived. And the Borg, they pursued us specifically because they wanted to assimilate dimensional travel capability. If the Republic starts opening portals routinely, we'll be inviting threats that make the Separatist droid armies look primitive. Nevertheless, Windu pressed, the technology exists. Count Dooku knows it exists. Your report indicates the Separatists were attempting to use Sith artifacts to create dimensional rifts during the battle that sent you to the other universe. The question isn't whether dimensional technology will be deployed in this war. The question is whether the Republic controls it, or whether the Separatists acquire it first. Anakin wanted to argue, wanted to invoke every warning that 8 months in the Star Trek universe had taught him about the dangers of treating experimental technology as tactical advantage. Wanted to explain that some knowledge was too dangerous to deploy, regardless of strategic benefits. But he was also Republic General who'd spent 3 years fighting a war that was killing billions. And if dimensional technology could end that war, could prevent the suffering that motivated everything he'd done since the Clone Wars began, didn't he have obligation to at least consider deployment? I'll cooperate with technical briefings, Anakin agreed reluctantly. But Masters, I'm requesting that dimensional research be classified at the highest security levels. Limited access, restricted deployment, and oversight by Jedi Council, rather than Senate or Supreme Chancellor. The political implications alone. The Supreme Chancellor has already requested briefing on the dimensional technology, Yoda interrupted, his ancient voice carrying concern that suggested the diminutive Jedi Master understood exactly what Anakin was worried about. Interested he is in capabilities you have brought back. Concerned I am about his interest, but refuse him we cannot without political complications that serve the Separatists' propaganda. Then I'll brief the Chancellor, Anakin stated. But Masters, watch him carefully. I saw things in the other universe that made me question how much we actually know about who's manipulating this war. The 500 first encountered evidence that suggested. He paused, uncertain how to articulate suspicions that bordered on treason, that suggested the Clone Wars might be orchestrated by forces beyond just Separatist ambition and Republic corruption. Explain, Mace Windu demanded. Anakin pulled up the holographic recording from the Malevolence's fist, the Separatist flagship that had activated the Darkstaff fragment. The image showed Count Dooku receiving orders from a shadowed figure whose voice had been electronically modulated, but which Anakin had recognized with terrible certainty. This transmission was recorded 8 months ago during the battle that sent us to the Star Trek universe, Anakin explained. The figure giving Dooku orders, I believe it was Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. I can't prove it definitively because the voice is distorted, but through the Force I sensed. He struggled to articulate what new type-like awareness had suggested. I sensed that whoever was speaking to Dooku had presence in both the Separatist command structure and Republic government. That's consistent with Sith methodology, manipulating both sides of the conflict. The council chamber went silent. Every Jedi Master processing the implication that the Supreme Chancellor, democratically elected leader of the Galactic Republic, might be Sith Lord manipulating the Clone Wars from both sides. Serious accusation this is, Yoda said finally. Evidence do you have? Beyond Force impression and voice similarity? No, Anakin admitted. not just suspicion based on 8 months of distance from Republic politics that let me see patterns I was too close to recognize before. But Masters, if the Chancellor is Sith, then briefing him on dimensional technology means giving the enemy access to capabilities that could destroy the Republic. We need to investigate before we share classified information with someone who might be using it against us. Investigate we will, Yoda confirmed, but carefully. Accuse the Supreme Chancellor without proof, and civil war we risk. Worse than Separatist conflict, that would be. General Skywalker, continue your cooperation with standard debriefing protocols, but dimensional technology specifications, share those only with Jedi Council until investigation is complete. Clear. Clear, Master Yoda, Anakin confirmed. The transmission ended, leaving Anakin alone in the quarantine facility's command center with the weight of choices that would determine whether the 501st's return helped the Republic or inadvertently enabled whoever was manipulating the Clone Wars from the shadows. 72 hours later, the 501st was cleared from quarantine with certification that no Borg contamination had survived the dimensional transit. The relief was palpable. Clone troopers who'd been terrified they might be carrying assimilation nanoprobes celebrated with the grim enthusiasm of soldiers who'd just been told they weren't walking time bombs. But the celebration was short-lived. General, incoming transmission from Coruscant, Rex reported. It's Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. He's requesting your immediate presence for debriefing on dimensional technology and strategic applications for Republic war effort. Through the Force, Anakin felt the trap closing. Refuse the Chancellor's summons, and he'd create political complications that would undermine the 501st's position. Attend, and he'd be face to face with someone he suspected was orchestrating the Clone Wars while pretending to be democracy's defender. Tell the Chancellor I'll be on Coruscant within 12 hours, Anakin replied, and Rex, assemble a security detail, full combat load. If Palpatine is what I think he is, this meeting might go badly very quickly. The journey to Coruscant took 10 hours through hyperspace, familiar lanes that the 501st had navigated thousands of times during the Clone Wars, but which now felt alien after 8 months, in a universe where faster-than-light travel operated on completely different principles. As the Resolute dropped out of hyperspace at Coruscant's orbital perimeter, Anakin felt the familiar presence of the Republic's capital world. Billions of consciousnesses creating background force noise that had always made the planet feel alive and vibrant. But now, after experiencing the Star Trek universe's different approach to civilization, Coruscant felt almost oppressive. The stark division between wealthy upper levels and impoverished lower districts. The Senate building's grandeur contrasted against slums where people starved. The clone troopers bred for war while senators debated ethics in air-conditioned chambers. The 501st had returned to the Republic, but they'd returned as people who'd experienced alternatives, who'd seen the Federation's commitment to post-scarcity economics, the Klingons' warrior honor code, even the Borg's terrible efficiency, and who couldn't unsee the Republic's failures just because they were home. "Sir," Ahsoka said quietly as they prepared to shuttle down to the Senate building, "are you sure about this? If the Chancellor really is Sith, confronting him in his office seems tactically unsound." We should investigate more, gather evidence, coordinate with the Council. We don't have time for slow investigation, Anakin replied. Ahsoka, if Palpatine is manipulating both sides of this war, every day we spend gathering evidence is another day billions of people die in a conflict he's orchestrating. I need to know, and the best way to know is to talk to him directly, use the Force to sense his intentions, and determine if my suspicions are paranoia or genuine threat. The meeting was scheduled for the Chancellor's private office, a space Anakin had visited dozens of times over 3 years, always finding Palpatine to be sympathetic listener to his frustrations with Jedi Council politics and supportive mentor who understood the pressures of command. But now, walking into that same office after 8 months away, Anakin felt through the Force something he'd been too close to recognize before. Darkness. Not overwhelming Sith presence that screamed corruption, but subtle wrongness, like a poison so carefully administered that the victim didn't realize they were being killed until the damage was irreversible. Anakin! Palpatine greeted him warmly, rising from his desk with the grandfatherly affection that had always made Anakin feel valued in ways the Jedi Council rarely did. My boy, when we received word that the 501st had been lost during the Battle of Raxus Secundus, I feared, but here you are, returned from dimensional exile through your own resourcefulness and determination. Tell me everything. I want to hear how you survived, how you fought your way back, and most importantly, what you learned about the dimensional technology that made it possible. Through the Force, Anakin watched Palpatine carefully, sensing the layers beneath the performance. The genuine affection was real. Palpatine did care about Anakin in the way a master craftsman cared about a particularly useful tool. But beneath that affection lay calculation, manipulation, and something darker that Anakin finally had the perspective to recognize. Chancellor, Anakin said carefully, before I discuss dimensional technology, I need to ask you something. During our time in the other universe, we recovered data from a Separatist flagship, a recording showing Count Dooku receiving orders from someone who gave authorization to activate the Sith artifact that created the dimensional rift. The voice was distorted, but do you know anything about that operation? Palpatine's expression didn't change. Didn't show guilt or recognition or anything except mild curiosity. But through the Force, Anakin felt the spike of alertness, the predator recognizing that prey had suddenly become more dangerous than anticipated. I'm afraid I don't understand what you're suggesting, Anakin, Palpatine replied smoothly. Are you implying that I somehow communicated with Count Dooku, that I have knowledge of Separatist operations? My boy, the stress of dimensional travel seems to have affected your judgment. Perhaps you should rest before we continue this discussion. Perhaps, Anakin agreed, or perhaps 8 months away from Republic politics gave me perspective I was too close to see before. Chancellor, are you Sith? The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Palpatine's expression shifted, not to anger or denial, but to something that might have been satisfaction. As if Anakin had finally asked the question Palpatine had been waiting years for him to voice. Sith, Palpatine repeated, his voice taking on different quality, deeper, carrying harmonics that suggested power barely restrained. Such a crude designation for what I actually am. But since you asked directly, Anakin, yes, I am what the Jedi would call Sith. I am Darth Sidious, and I've been orchestrating the Clone Wars from both sides since before you became a Jedi Knight. The question now is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Anakin's hand moved toward his lightsaber, but Palpatine raised a hand in gesture that was more warning than threat. Before you make decisions you can't unmake, Palpatine continued, consider what you've learned during your dimensional exile. You fought species called the Borg, who wanted to assimilate you into collective consciousness that erased individuality. You allied with civilizations that subordinated personal freedom to institutional stability. And you returned here to a republic that's collapsing under its own corruption, while Jedi Council enforces dogma that denies everything you've become. Tell me, Anakin, which system actually serves the people you're trying to protect? The Republic's bureaucratic paralysis, the Jedi's emotional detachment, or something else entirely? Through the Force, Anakin felt the manipulation in Palpatine's words, but he also felt the terrible truth beneath them. The Republic was failing. The Jedi Council was inflexible. And 8 months in the Star Trek universe had shown him that there were other ways to organize civilization that didn't require accepting corruption as inevitable. The Sith aren't the answer, Anakin stated. I've seen what happens when power is concentrated without accountability. The Borg, the worst Klingon houses, Section 31. Every authoritarian system makes the same promises about efficiency and order while ignoring that people need freedom more than they need competent oppression. Then help me build something better, Palpatine proposed. Not Sith dictatorship, not Republic democracy, something that combines the best of both. Use the dimensional technology you've brought back to access resources from parallel realities. End the Clone Wars, not through military victory, but through demonstrating that cooperation serves everyone better than continued conflict. Anakin, I've been manipulating this war, yes, but manipulation can serve constructive objectives if directed properly. Work with me. Build the future you saw glimpses of in the other universe, a galaxy where people don't suffer because institutions are too corrupt or too dogmatic to address their needs. The offer was seductive in ways that terrified Anakin precisely because parts of it aligned with what he'd been thinking since returning to the Republic. The Jedi Council was inflexible. The Republic was corrupt, and dimensional technology represented power that could fundamentally transform how civilization operated. But accepting Palpatine's offer meant betraying the Jedi, betraying the Republic, and becoming exactly what the Borg had been, individuals who justified terrible choices through claiming they served greater goods. No, Anakin said, his hand finally closing on his lightsaber hilt. Chancellor, or Darth Sidious, or whatever you actually are, I'm arresting you for treason against the Republic. You have the right to defend yourself, but this conversation is over. Palpatine smiled, and the office erupted in Force lightning that turned Democratic leader into Sith Lord revealed. The battle for the Republic's future had begun, and everything the 501st had learned about resistance, about refusing to accept that any form of tyranny was inevitable, about fighting even when defeat seemed certain. All of it would be tested in the next few minutes as Anakin Skywalker faced the master manipulator who'd orchestrated the Clone Wars and who wanted to transform dimensional refugee into Sith apprentice. Resistance wasn't futile, but it was going to cost everything. The Force lightning erupted from Palpatine's fingers like a storm given physical form, crackling violet energy that turned the Chancellor's office into a battlefield where the rules of conventional combat meant nothing. Anakin's lightsaber ignited mid-draw, the blue blade intercepting the lightning through muscle memory refined across 3 years of war and 8 months fighting enemies who'd forced him to adapt beyond Jedi orthodoxy. But this wasn't like deflecting blaster bolts or dueling Separatist commanders. This was facing a Sith Lord who'd spent decades concealing his true nature while positioning himself at the heart of Republic power, and who now revealed abilities that made Count Dooku look like an apprentice playing at darkness. "You've changed, young Skywalker," Palpatine observed, his voice carrying the layered harmonics of the dark side fully unleashed. The grandfatherly facade had vanished, replaced by something ancient and terrible that had been hiding behind political theater. 8 months in another universe fighting cybernetic collectives and dimensional predators. It's made you harder, more pragmatic, less bound by Jedi dogma about emotional control and detachment. That's good. That's exactly what you needed to become, what I've been cultivating you to be since you were 9 years old. Anakin pushed back against the lightning, channeling the Force through his lightsaber in techniques that combined Jedi training and adaptations he'd developed fighting the Borg. Rapid frequency shifts that prevented the enemy from adapting to static defenses. "I'm not your apprentice, I'm not your tool. And I'm sure as hell not going to let you continue manipulating the Republic while people die in a war you're orchestrating from both sides." Manipulating? Palpatine's laugh carried genuine amusement as he intensified the lightning assault, forcing Anakin backward toward the office's reinforced walls. "I'm not manipulating the Republic, Anakin. I'm saving it from corruption that would have destroyed it anyway, from Jedi arrogance that treated democracy as subsidiary to your order's unelected authority, from institutional paralysis that made governing impossible. The Clone Wars aren't tragedy. They're necessary purge that will allow something better to emerge from the ashes." Through their clash, Anakin felt the office's security systems activating. Blast doors sealing, communications jamming, the defensive shields preventing external intervention. Palpatine had prepared this space for exactly this confrontation, had anticipated that eventually someone would discover his true nature and challenge him in the heart of his power. "You're delusional if you think killing billions improves the galaxy," Anakin replied, shifting to Form 5 Gemso's aggressive counterattacks that turned defense into offense. His lightsaber carved through the Chancellor's desk, through furniture, through anything that created barriers between them. "I've seen what happens when systems justify atrocities through claiming they serve greater goods. The Borg thought assimilation created perfection. Section 31 thought illegal operations protected the Federation. Every tyrant in history claimed they were necessary. You're not different. You're not better. You're just another dictator who thinks power makes them right. And you're just another Jedi who thinks principles matter more than results," Palpatine countered, abandoning lightning for direct force assault, telekinetic pressure that crushed inward from all directions, attempting to overwhelm Anakin through raw power that exceeded anything conventional Jedi training prepared students to face. But Anakin had fought void stalkers that existed across dimensions, had used the Force to physically move a 600-meter Borg sphere, had learned during 8 months in the Star Trek universe that the Force could accomplish things Jedi Council considered impossible if you were willing to push beyond orthodox limitations. He didn't resist Palpatine's telekinetic assault. He redirected it. Channeled the crushing pressure into rotational force that spun through the office like a tornado, turning Palpatine's attack into environmental chaos that disrupted both combatants equally. Impressive, Palpatine acknowledged, his expression showing something that might have been pride in a student who'd exceeded expectations. The other universe taught you to think beyond Jedi limitations, to use the Force creatively rather than just following forms the Council approved. That's exactly the evolution I wanted you to achieve. Anakin, stop fighting me and listen. Everything I've done has been preparing the galaxy for threats beyond the Separatists. Threats like the Borg you encountered. Threats like dimensional predators. Threats that require unified galactic government with strength to actually defend civilization, instead of debating it to death. Unified government under Sith control, Anakin corrected, his lightsaber maintaining defensive pattern while his free hand channeled Force energy toward the sealed blast doors. If he could breach the office's containment, get backup from clone troopers or Jedi who were undoubtedly responding to the disturbance. Under competent control, Palpatine clarified. Sith, Jedi, those are just philosophical labels. What matters is effectiveness. And Anakin, you've seen how ineffective the Republic has become. How the Jedi Council clings to traditions that don't serve the people they claim to protect. I'm offering you the chance to change that. To use the dimensional technology you've brought back to access resources that could end the Clone Wars immediately. To build a galaxy where suffering is minimized through actual governance rather than through passive observation while billions die. Through the Force, Anakin felt the insidious logic of Palpatine's argument, not because it was true, but because it exploited every frustration Anakin had accumulated during 3 years of war and 8 months watching other civilizations handle governance differently. The Republic was corrupt, the Jedi Council was inflexible, and dimensional technology represented power that could fundamentally transform galactic civilization. But accepting Palpatine's vision meant embracing the same logic that had created the Borg. That efficiency and order justified eliminating individual freedom, that suffering could be minimized through systematic control, that the ends justified means regardless of how terrible those means became. I've heard this pitch before, Anakin stated. Different words, different civilization, same fundamental lie. The Borg told me assimilation would end conflict. Section 31 said illegal operations protected the Federation. General Cole argued that Klingon conquest brought honor to the conquered. Every authoritarian system claims it's necessary, and everyone ignores that people would rather struggle with freedom than live comfortably in cages. Then you choose the Jedi, Palpatine observed, his voice carrying disappointment that felt almost genuine. Choose their emotional detachment and their dogma about attachment leading to darkness. Choose their failure to prevent this war or to end it once begun. Choose their comfortable position as Republic servants, while claiming independence from political concerns. That's your decision? I choose something you can't understand, Anakin replied. I choose the lesson the 500 first learned fighting the Borg, that resistance isn't futile even when it seems impossible, that individuals matter more than collective efficiency, that some things are worth defending even when defending them costs everything. We fought our way home from another universe because we refused to accept that being stranded was inevitable. And I'm refusing to accept that your vision is inevitable just because you've been planning it for decades. The office exploded in force conflict that transcended physical combat, two wielders of the cosmic energy engaging in battle that operated as much through will and conviction as through technical skill. Palpatine fought with the accumulated power of decades studying the dark side, with techniques the Sith had refined across millennia, with the absolute certainty that his vision was correct, and that anyone opposing it was simply too limited to understand. Anakin fought with techniques learned across 3 years of the Clone Wars, enhanced by 8 months adapting to enemies who forced him beyond orthodox Jedi training. Empowered by the absolute conviction that some things mattered more than victory, and that choosing those things was what separated people from the tools that authoritarians tried to make them into. The battle raged for subjective eternity compressed into objective minutes. Lightning met lightsaber, telekinesis countered telekinesis. Force techniques that should have killed conventional opponents were matched by adaptations that Palpatine hadn't anticipated because they drew on experiences outside his frame of reference. Then the blast doors exploded inward, not from external assault, but from combined force push by 3 Jedi Masters who'd sensed the conflict through the Force and who'd spent the past 4 minutes fighting through security systems to reach Palpatine's office. Mace Windu, Plo Koon, and Shak Ti. Palpatine, Mace Windu stated, his voice carrying absolute authority as his lightsaber ignited with purple brilliance. You're under arrest for treason against the Republic. Surrender or face the consequences. Palpatine's expression shifted from disappointment to cold calculation. 4 Jedi Masters, including Mace Windu, who was arguably Order's finest duelist, versus 1 Sith Lord, regardless of how powerful, created mathematics that even dark side confidence couldn't overcome. "This isn't over, Anakin," Palpatine said, his voice carrying promise rather than threat. "You think you've won by resisting my offer, but you've simply delayed the inevitable. The Republic will fall through its own corruption, if not through my direction. The Jedi will be destroyed through political maneuvering, if not through Order 66. And you'll face choice again about whether principles matter more than protecting the people you love. When that moment comes, remember this conversation. Remember that I offered you the power to prevent the suffering you're about to witness." He moved, not toward the Jedi, but toward the window. Reinforced transparent steel that should have been unbreakable. Force lightning erupted with power that exceeded anything he'd deployed during the fight with Anakin, shattering the window and creating opening into Coruscant's cityscape thousands of meters below. "Stop him," Mace commanded, but Palpatine was already gone, falling through the opening with force-enhanced velocity that turned descent into controlled flight, disappearing into the traffic lanes and architectural canyons before the Jedi could pursue. The silence in the destroyed office carried weight of realization that galactic politics had just fundamentally changed. General Skywalker, Mace said, his expression showing the strain of processing that the Supreme Chancellor had been Sith Lord orchestrating the Clone Wars from both sides. "Report, what happened here? How did you know Palpatine was Sith?" Anakin explained. "The recording from the Separatist flagship. The suspicions developed during 8 months outside Republic politics. The confrontation that confirmed what he'd feared. And throughout the explanation, he felt through the Force that the Jedi Council was struggling to accept how catastrophically they'd failed to detect darkness operating at the heart of their government. The Republic will face crisis when this becomes public," Shakti observed. "The Supreme Chancellor revealed as Sith traitor, the Clone Wars exposed as orchestrated conflict. Political stability that was already fragile will collapse completely." "Then we don't make it public immediately," Plo Koon suggested. "Masters, we need time to prepare proper response, to identify who else might be compromised, to determine how deeply Palpatine's manipulation extends through Republic institutions. Announcing this precipitously creates chaos that serves the Sith's objectives as effectively as his continued concealment did." "Agreed," Mace decided. "General Skywalker, you and the 501st are to maintain operational secrecy about this confrontation. The Council will conduct investigation into Palpatine's network, while officially claiming the Chancellor is recovering from assassination attempt by Separatist agents. When we've mapped the full extent of his influence, we move publicly. Until then, this stays between the 5 of us and the Council." "Understood," Anakin confirmed, though something in his Force sense whispered that delaying the revelation would create its own catastrophes. 6 days later, the message arrived on encrypted channels that bypassed normal Republic communications, transmitted directly to the Resolute with codes that identified the sender as someone within Palpatine's network. Count Dooku's holographic form materialized in Anakin's quarters, the Sith Lord's aristocratic features showing calculation rather than hostility. "General Skywalker," Dooku greeted him, "I understand you've recently had illuminating conversation with my master, and that you chose to resist his recruitment rather than accepting the opportunities he offered. I'm impressed. Most beings who discover Darth Sidious's true nature either join him or die. You've managed a third option." "What do you want, Dooku?" Anakin demanded. "To propose alliance," Dooku replied. "Not between Sith and Jedi. I'm not naive enough to think that's possible. But between parties who both recognize that Palpatine's vision is unacceptable. He manipulated both sides of the Clone Wars for his own objectives, used the Separatists as tools, used the Republic as cover, and now that you've forced him to reveal himself prematurely, he'll escalate to more extreme methods to achieve his vision of galactic unity under Sith control." "You're his apprentice," Anakin observed. "Why would you betray him?" "Because I'm Sith," Dooku replied simply, "and Sith don't serve. We seek power. Palpatine's vision includes my eventual replacement by a stronger apprentice. Probably you, if you'd accepted his offer. I prefer not to wait for that inevitability, so I'm proposing we work together, temporarily, to eliminate our mutual threat before he can implement whatever escalation he's planning." Through the Force, Anakin sensed the layers in Dooku's offer. Genuine self-interest, yes, but also recognition that Palpatine had become liability to everyone's objectives, Jedi, Sith, Republic, and Separatist alike. "I'll consider it," Anakin replied carefully. "But Dooku, if we work together, it's temporary alliance against mutual threat, not partnership, not reformation of the Sith. Just tactical cooperation to prevent Palpatine from implementing whatever he's planning." "Acceptable terms," Dooku confirmed. "I'll transmit coordinates for a meeting where we can discuss strategies. And, General, bring your dimensional technology specifications, because I suspect Palpatine's escalation involves using similar technology to access forces from parallel realities. If we're going to stop him, we need to understand what he's attempting before he succeeds." The transmission ended, leaving Anakin alone with the recognition that the Clone Wars had just evolved into something far more complicated than Republic versus Separatists. Palpatine was planning something that worried even his own apprentice. The Jedi Council was investigating conspiracy that might extend through every level of Republic government, and the 501st dimensional refugees who'd fought their way home were about to discover that surviving the Borg was preparation for facing threats even more dangerous because they wore familiar faces and spoke with voices people trusted. Aboard the Resolute, command briefing. "Sir, we're receiving reports from multiple systems," Rex stated, pulling up tactical displays that showed concerning patterns. "Separatist forces are withdrawing from major engagements. Droid armies standing down. It's like someone gave orders to cease offensive operations across the entire war zone." Dooku's preparing for something, Anakin realized. Pulling back resources, consolidating forces, getting ready for whatever Palpatine's planning to do next. "Master," Ahsoka added, "the Jedi Council transmitted updated threat assessment. They've identified 17 Republic senators, 43 military officers, and an unknown number of clone commanders who they suspect are compromised by Palpatine's network if he activates them simultaneously. He could cripple the Republic from within while we're focused on external threats," Anakin finished. "We need to move faster, need to identify who's compromised before Palpatine can implement whatever contingency he's been planning." "General, permission to speak freely," Rex requested. "Sir, we spent 8 months in the Star Trek universe learning that some conflicts can't be won through conventional military operations, that sometimes you need to think like the Borg, adapt faster than your enemy expects, deploy capabilities they don't anticipate, refuse to accept that any form of defeat is inevitable. Maybe this is one of those situations. Maybe we use the dimensional technology not as weapon but as leverage. Show Palpatine that we can access resources from infinite realities if he escalates. Make him recalculate whether implementing his contingency is worth facing threats he can't predict or control." Through the Force, Anakin felt the dangerous logic in Rex's suggestion. Dimensional technology as deterrent rather than weapon, demonstrating capability to access parallel universes as way to force Palpatine to negotiate rather than escalate. It was exactly the kind of pragmatic thinking that 8 months fighting the Borg had taught them, and exactly the kind of thinking that could spiral into catastrophe if deployed without understanding consequences. "We'll consider all options," Anakin decided. "But we're not opening dimensional portals unless we've exhausted conventional approaches. Because Rex, the moment we start accessing parallel realities tactically, we're doing exactly what Palpatine wants. We're demonstrating that the technology works, that it can be weaponized, and that whoever controls it can fundamentally transform galactic power dynamics. That's not deterrence. That's invitation for every power-hungry faction to pursue the same capabilities. Then what do? Ahsoka challenged. We do what the 501st has always done, Anakin replied. We adapt. We innovate. We refuse to accept that the enemy's plan is inevitable. And we prove that resistance isn't futile, even when we're facing Sith lords who've been manipulating galactic politics for decades. The 501st had returned from dimensional exile. They'd survived the Borg through refusing to accept assimilation. Now they'd face the Sith through refusing to accept that tyranny was inevitable. And somewhere in the shadows, Palpatine was planning escalation that would test whether the lessons learned in the Star Trek universe were enough to prevent the Republic's fall, or whether dimensional technology would be the catalyst that destroyed everything the 501st had fought to preserve. The Clone Wars had entered a new phase, one where dimensional refugees who'd fought cybernetic collectives would determine whether the Republic remained free or whether Sith manipulation finally achieved the galactic unity that Palpatine had been orchestrating since before Anakin became a Jedi. Resistance wasn't futile, but it required everything. And the 501st was about to discover if everything they had was enough. Word count 3,583. Conclusion. The 501st Legion had come home, but home had changed, and so had they. 8 months fighting in the Star Trek universe against the Borg Collective had taught them that resistance wasn't futile, that individuality mattered more than collective efficiency, and that some things were worth defending, even when defending them seemed impossible. They'd forged alliances with the Federation, the Klingons, and even the Romulans. They'd lost thousands in battles across dimensional barriers, and they'd learned that survival required adapting beyond orthodox thinking while maintaining the principles that made survival worth the cost. Now returned to the Republic they'd left behind, they faced threats more insidious than the Borg had ever been. Sith lords manipulating both sides of the Clone Wars, corruption rotting democratic institutions from within, and dimensional technology that could either save the galaxy or destroy it depending on who controlled its deployment. Anakin Skywalker stood on the Resolute's observation deck, watching Coruscant's lights spread across the planet's surface, feeling through the Force the weight of choices ahead. Palpatine had escaped but would return. Dooku proposed alliance that violated every principle Jedi training enforced. The Council conducted investigations that might tear the Republic apart when results became public, and the dimensional technology that had brought them home represented power that factions across the galaxy would kill to acquire. Master Ahsoka joined him, her presence in the Force as steady as it had been throughout their dimensional exile. What happens now? We've stopped Palpatine from recruiting you, but he's still out there planning escalation. The Clone Wars continue, and we're carrying knowledge about dimensional technology that everyone wants, but that might destroy the galaxy if deployed wrong. Now, Anakin replied, we do what the 501st has always done. We fight, not just against the Separatists or the Sith, but for the principle that people deserve freedom, even when freedom is harder than accepting competent oppression. The Borg taught us that lesson. The Federation reinforced it, and now we apply it here. proving that the Republic is worth saving even when saving it requires confronting the darkness that's been hiding in plain sight. Through the Force, he felt the challenges ahead, Palpatine's contingencies waiting to activate, Dooku's uncertain alliance, the political chaos when the Sith infiltration became public knowledge, and the dimensional threats that might yet emerge if the technology they'd brought home attracted attention from beings beyond the Borg. But he also felt the 500 first around him, 9,000 warriors who'd voted to come home despite knowing what waited for them, who'd fought the Borg to a standstill, who'd proven that resistance wasn't futile when it was powered by conviction rather than just tactical advantage. They had returned, and the galaxy, Republic, Separatist, Sith, and everything in between was about to learn what happened when soldiers who'd refused to be assimilated by the Borg applied those same principles to preventing the Republic's fall. The Clone Wars would continue, the Sith would escalate, and the dimensional technology would either save civilization or doom it. But the 501st Legion had learned one truth that transcended universes. Resistance is never futile when people choose to resist anyway, and sometimes the hardest battles are won not through superior firepower, but through refusing to accept that defeat is inevitable. The 501st had faced the Borg Collective. Now they'd face the Sith, and they'd win or die, proving that trying mattered more than calculations about probable outcomes. Either way, they were the 501st Legion, and resistance was what they did.